Story 1. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the emergency line rang. Dispatcher Olivia Grant had worked night shifts for 6 years. She'd heard everything: domestic disputes, car crashes, drunken confessions whispered through tears. But she had never heard silence like this. The call came from Blackridge Manor. Olivia answered. 911, what's your emergency? Nothing. Not breathing. Not static. Not movement. Just silence. She checked the caller ID. The number was registered to Blackridge Manor, a Victorian estate sitting alone on 12 acres just outside town. The property had a history, rumors of disputes, sudden deaths, financial ruin. But officially, it was owned by one man. Elliot Voss. Wealthy. Reclusive. 48. No known family. Olivia leaned closer to her headset. Sir, if you can hear me, please make a sound. And then, a whisper, so faint she almost missed it. Is still here. Olivia's stomach tightened. Who is still there? A pause. Then, clearer now. I didn't finish. The line went dead. 3:24 a.m. Officer Daniel Mercer was closest to the property. He'd been with the department 12 years, steady, calm, rarely rattled. Until he heard the address. Blackridge Manor, he repeated over the radio. That's right, Olivia replied. Possible distress call. No response after disconnect. Daniel knew the place. Everyone did. Blackridge Manor had been built in 1891 by industrialist Howard Blackridge. The family fortune collapsed after a string of unexplained deaths. The house changed hands several times over the next century. Fires. Lawsuits. Disappearances. 3 years ago, Elliot Voss bought it in cash, and never once attended a public event again. 3:41 a.m. The manor stood at the end of a long, winding gravel drive. The iron gates were open. That was the first bad sign. Daniel parked just short of the front steps. The house loomed above him, 3 stories of dark windows and crumbling stone gargoyles. No lights on. No cars in the driveway except one black sedan, registered to Elliot Voss. Daniel approached the front door. It was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. Mr. Voss? Police. The air inside was stale. Heavy. Almost metallic. The foyer stretched ahead. Grand staircase. Antique chandelier. Portraits lining the walls. Every portrait had its eyes scratched out. Daniel's pulse quickened. Mr. Voss? No answer. He moved toward the living room. Furniture covered in white sheets. Dust undisturbed. Except for one set of footprints. Fresh. Leading toward the kitchen. 3:49 a.m. The kitchen lights were on. Daniel froze at the doorway. A chair lay overturned. A wine glass shattered on the tile floor. And on the center island, a phone. Screen cracked. Call history open. Last dialed, 911, 3:17 a.m. Daniel stepped forward slowly. Mr. Voss. Then he saw it. A dark smear on the tile. Blood. Not pooled. Dragged. Leading down the hallway toward the basement door. Daniel radioed it in. Possible injury. I'm going downstairs. The basement light flickered as he opened the door. The smell hit him first. Copper and decay. He descended carefully. Each step creaked. Halfway down, he saw something at the bottom. A body. Male. Face down. Hands bound behind his back. Daniel rushed forward, heart pounding. He rolled the man over. It wasn't Elliot Voss. This man was younger. Early 30s. Unknown. Dead at least several hours. Single gunshot wound to the chest. But that wasn't what made Daniel's breath catch. Carved into the concrete floor beneath the body. 3 words. Is still here. 4:02 a.m. Backup arrived. The house was cleared. No sign of Elliot Voss. No sign of forced entry. Security system disabled from inside. And no weapon found. Detective Mara Quinn took over the scene just before dawn. Sharp-eyed. Analytical. Known for solving cases others gave up on. She stood in the basement staring at the carved message. Is still here, she repeated softly. Daniel nodded. That's what the 911 caller whispered. Caller was Voss. Voice was male. Could have been. Mara studied the body. Whoever did this wanted us to see that message. Daniel frowned. You think Voss killed him? Mara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the basement walls and saw something strange. The concrete wasn't original. There were patches, newer sections, like something had been sealed behind them. 7:18 a.m. Forensics identified the victim by fingerprints. Nathan Hale. Reported missing 3 days ago. Local journalist. Last article published, an investigation into Elliot Voss. Specifically, the previous owner of Blackridge Manor, a woman named Clara Whitmore, declared dead in a house fire 20 years ago. Body never recovered. Mara stared at the report. Nathan Hale had been digging into Clara Whitmore's death. Now he was dead in her old basement. And Elliot Voss was gone. 10:42 a.m. Mara requested architectural records of the manor. Original blueprints revealed something chilling. There was supposed to be a second basement room, a hidden chamber, no visible entrance. But the patched concrete walls matched exactly where that chamber should be. Mara turned to Daniel. If someone sealed a room behind that wall. Daniel finished the thought. Something's still inside. 12:15 p.m. The demolition team arrived. Concrete cracked under heavy tools. Dust filled the basement air. Then, a hollow sound. The wall gave way. Behind it was darkness. Cold. Still. The team widened the opening. Flashlights cut into the void and illuminated something that made everyone step back. A chair, bolted to the floor, leather straps attached. And behind it, photographs lining the wall. Dozens of them. All of Elliot Voss. From childhood to adulthood. Candids. School photos. Surveillance shots. And in the center, a single older photograph. Clara Whitmore, standing beside a young Elliot Voss. Her hand resting on his shoulder. Mara's voice was barely audible. She didn't die in that fire. Daniel swallowed. Then who did? And as if answering the question, they heard it. A faint sound. From deeper inside the hidden chamber. A breath. Not from behind them. From inside the dark. Someone was still in there. Alive. The sound came again. Soft. Wet. Breathing. Detective Mara Quinn held up a hand, silencing everyone in the basement. Dust still drifted through the flashlight beams from the broken concrete wall. The air beyond the hidden chamber felt different, colder, stale, undisturbed for years. Officer Daniel Mercer swallowed. That's not an echo. No, Mara said quietly. It's not. She stepped forward, flashlight cutting deeper into the darkness. The hidden chamber extended another 10 feet past the bolted chair. The walls were lined with warped wooden panels. Electrical wires ran along the ceiling, old, improvised. Someone had powered something down here. The breathing grew louder. Irregular. Shallow. Police. Daniel called. If you can hear me, we're coming in. No answer. Mara crouched beside the chair first. The leather restraints were cracked with age, but recently used. There were fresh impressions in the dust around its base. The floor beneath it was scratched. Something, or someone, had struggled. She turned the beam toward the back wall. That's when she saw her. A figure curled against the far corner. Thin. Barefoot. Hair hanging in tangled gray strands over her face. Alive. 12:22 p.m. Paramedics were rushed down immediately. The woman flinched when they approached, shielding her eyes from the light. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Wrists scarred. Ankles bruised. Her clothes were layered mismatched fabrics, too large, tied together with fraying cord. She whispered something. Mara knelt close. It's okay. You're safe now. The woman's lips trembled. He said you'd come. Mara exchanged a look with Daniel. Who said that? She asked gently. The woman's eyes darted toward the chair. Him. 1:05 p.m. Upstairs, the manor buzzed with activity. Crime scene techs photographed every inch of the basement chamber. The hidden space had clearly been lived in. There were stacked canned goods, plastic water containers, blankets, a battery-powered lantern. Someone had been kept there. For years. The woman was transported to St. Augustine Medical Center under guard. She gave no name, no identification. Her fingerprints returned nothing in the system. But when Mara sat across from her in the hospital room 2 hours later, she didn't need confirmation. The resemblance was undeniable, even beneath the gaunt cheeks and hollow eyes. She looked like Clara Whitmore. 3:40 p.m. Mara laid a photograph on the bedside table. A younger Clara Whitmore. Smiling. Newspaper clipping from 1999. The woman stared at it. Her hand shook as she reached forward. That was before, she whispered. Before what? Mara asked. Before he locked me away. The room felt smaller. Elliot Voss. Mara asked carefully. The woman's expression hardened. No, she said. Howard. Mara felt a chill crawl up her spine. Howard Blackridge had died in 1923. 4:15 p.m. Daniel joined Mara outside the hospital room. She thinks Howard Blackridge did this, he asked. She's disoriented, Mara said. Trauma like that fractures memory. But she believes someone named Howard locked her in that chamber. Daniel frowned. Blackridge Manor was built by Howard Blackridge. He died over a century ago. Mara crossed her arms. Unless Howard isn't who we think it is. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. You think Voss used the name? It wouldn't be the first time someone assumed a historical identity to justify control. Control. She was kept alive down there, Daniel. Federation monitored. Photographed. Mara paused. That wasn't random violence. That was obsession. 6:02 p.m. Forensics uncovered more in the hidden chamber. Behind the photographs of Elliot Voss were dates written in marker. Every year. From age 6 to last month. The earliest photos were clearly school portraits. The later ones were surveillance stills, grocery stores, sidewalks, parking garages. Voss hadn't just been living at Blackridge Manor. He'd been watched. His entire life. Mara stared at the timeline. This started before he bought the house. Daniel's voice was low. You think Clara was keeping tabs on him? No, Mara shook her head. Look at the angles. These were taken by different cameras. Public security footage. Someone with access. Meaning Voss may not have been the only one obsessed. 8:18 p.m. A breakthrough came from the coroner's office. Nathan Hale's time of death was estimated between 10 p.m. and midnight the previous night. Gunshot wound at close range. No defensive wounds. Which meant he either trusted the shooter or never saw them coming. Gunshot residue was found on his jacket, but not his hands. He hadn't fired a weapon. Mara leaned back in her chair. If Clara's been locked away for 20 years, she didn't shoot Hale. Daniel nodded. So Voss did. Maybe. You don't sound convinced. I'm not. 9:03 p.m. Security footage from a gas station 3 miles from Blackridge Manor surfaced. Timestamp, 2:41 a.m. A black sedan pulled in. Registered to Elliot Voss. The driver stepped out. But it wasn't Voss. It was Nathan Hale. Alive. 2 hours after the estimated time of death. Daniel stared at the screen. That's impossible. Mara zoomed in. Hale looked nervous. He kept checking his phone. The timestamp on his screen read 2:43 a.m. Then another vehicle pulled into frame. An older model SUV. Dark green. The driver remained inside. Hale approached the SUV. The two spoke briefly. Then Hale got inside. The vehicles left together. 9:47 p.m. Vehicle registration traced the SUV to a rental agency. Rented under the name Howard Black. Mara exhaled slowly. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. That's not subtle. No, she agreed. It's not. Fake ID. Likely. Daniel leaned forward. So Hale meets someone using the name Howard Black 2 hours after he was supposedly killed. And then ends up dead in Voss's basement. And Voss is missing. Silence hung between them. Then Daniel asked the question neither wanted to say out loud. What if Voss isn't the captor? 11:30 p.m. Mara returned alone to Blackridge Manor. The house felt heavier at night. She walked through the foyer, past the portraits with scratched-out eyes. But now she noticed something she'd missed before. The scratches weren't random. They were precise. Only certain portraits had damaged eyes. She lifted her flashlight. Every portrait of Howard Blackridge was untouched. Every portrait added later, subsequent owners, had the eyes gouged out. Mara's pulse quickened. Someone wanted Howard remembered, and everyone else erased. 12:12 a.m. In the study, she found it. A hidden safe behind a bookshelf. Inside were journals. Dozens of them. leather-bound. The handwriting inside was erratic, but consistent across years. The earliest entry dated back 23 years. The author signed each entry the same way. H. Mara flipped through rapidly. Entries described Clara Whitmore in obsessive detail. Her routines, her fears, her beauty, and then, a shift in tone. She must be protected from the fire. Fire! Mara's mind raced. Clara had supposedly died in a house fire. But what if she hadn't? What if someone had staged it? Another entry. Elliot is unworthy. He does not understand what she is. Elliot. Mara's stomach turned. The final recent entry, written just days ago. Nathan knows too much. He will force her to leave. I cannot allow that. 1:03 a.m. Mara drove straight to the hospital. Clara was awake, watching the door. You found them, Clara whispered when Mara entered. The journals? Mara asked. Clara nodded slowly. He thinks he's Howard, she said. He always has. Who does? Clara's voice trembled. Elliot. Silence settled thick between them. Mara leaned forward. Clara, did Elliot lock you in that room? Tears filled Clara's eyes. No, she said softly. I locked myself in. Mara blinked. What? He told me they were coming for me. That the fire would destroy everything. That only the chamber was safe. You believed him. He was so young, Clara whispered. So certain. He said he was protecting me. How old was he? 16. Mara's heart pounded. Where is he now? Clara looked past her, toward the hallway. He's still here. Mara turned sharply. The hospital hallway was empty. But down the corridor, a man stood at the far end, watching. Dark hair, hollow eyes, early 40s, exactly matching Elliot Voss's driver's license photo. He didn't run. He didn't speak. He simply smiled, and stepped backward into the stairwell. By the time Mara reached the stairwell, it was empty. The heavy metal door banged softly against its hinge. She took the steps 2 at a time, radio already in hand. Officer down the east stairwell, suspect heading toward lower exit. Male, mid-40s. Elliot Voss. Her voice stayed steady. Her pulse did not. The lobby doors burst open as she reached the bottom floor. Cold night air rushed in. Empty sidewalk. No running footsteps. No vehicle engine. Nothing. It was as if he had dissolved into the dark. 1:28 a.m. Security footage was pulled immediately. But it made no sense. At 1:04 a.m., the hallway camera showed no one standing outside Clara's room. At 1:05 a.m., it flickered. At 1:06 a.m., Mara exited the room and looked down the corridor, alone. No Elliot. No figure at the end. The footage showed only her. Daniel stared at the monitor. You're sure? I saw him. He doesn't show up on any camera. Mara felt something cold slide down her spine. He's been manipulating perception for years, she said. Why stop now? Daniel didn't answer, because they both knew what she was implying. Either Elliot Voss had learned how to move unseen, or Clara wasn't the only one whose memory had fractured. 8:15 a.m. The next morning, a dive into archived records began. The original house fire that supposedly killed Clara Whitmore had occurred 20 years ago in a small rental property on the south side of town. The fire report listed 1 body recovered, 2 badly burned for visual identification. Dental records had been used, but the dentist who confirmed them retired 2 years later, moved out of state, deceased. Mara requested the original forensic files. They were incomplete. Missing pages, missing photographs, missing the most critical document, the autopsy summary. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Convenient. Not convenient, Mara corrected. Intentional. 10:42 a.m. Clara agreed to tell the full story. Mara recorded everything. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft hum of medical equipment. It started slowly, Clara said. Elliot was different from other boys. He watched people, studied them, especially me. You were his guardian? Mara asked. Yes. His parents died in a car accident. I was a family friend. How old was he? 8. Clara closed her eyes briefly. He used to say I reminded him of the portraits in the manor. The Blackridge portraits. She nodded. He became obsessed with Howard Blackridge. Read everything about him. Convinced himself that Howard had been misunderstood, that he'd been protecting his family from enemies. Mara wrote carefully. When did it change? When he was 16, Clara whispered. He started calling himself Howard. Daniel shifted slightly. Did he hurt you? Clara hesitated. No, she said softly. Not at first. The night of the fire. It was raining, Clara said. I remember that. The electricity went out around 9 p.m. She described Elliot standing in the doorway of the living room. Calm. Too calm. He said it was time. Time for what? Mara asked. For protection. Clara's voice trembled. He said they were coming to burn the house. That he'd seen it in his dreams. That the only way to survive was to disappear. What happened next? He locked the back doors. Turned on the stove. Mara's pen froze. He filled the house with gas. Daniel swore quietly under his breath. I tried to stop him, Clara said. But he wasn't frantic. He wasn't angry. He was certain. And the body found in the fire. Clara's eyes grew distant. There was a woman staying with us. A tenant. Margaret Hill. She rented the upstairs room. Mara's breath caught. She was unconscious when the fire started. Elliot had drugged her. Said it would make it believable. Daniel's voice was tight. He staged your death. Yes. And then? He took me to Blackridge Manor. He'd been planning it for months. The chamber was already built. You didn't try to escape. I did, she said. Once. What happened? He cried. Mara blinked. What? He cried and said the world would destroy me. That only he could keep me safe. Silence filled the room. After a while, Clara whispered, I started to believe him. 2:05 p.m. Nathan Hale entered the picture years later. A journalist digging into irregularities in the Whitmore fire case. He found the missing autopsy discrepancies, the falsified dental records, the financial transaction that showed 16-year-old Elliot Voss inheriting Clara's estate days after her death. Nathan began following Voss, unaware that Voss had cameras everywhere. He knew about Nathan long before Nathan knew about him, Mara said quietly after the interview. Daniel nodded grimly. And when Nathan got too close, he decided to protect the story. 4:37 p.m. But something still didn't fit. The gas station footage showed Nathan willingly entering the SUV rented under Howard Black, which meant Nathan had agreed to meet him. Why? Mara requested Nathan's phone records. One outgoing message stood out, sent at 2:12 a.m. the night he died. To an unsaved number. Message. I know she's alive. 6 p.m. They traced the number. Prepaid phone. Activated 3 days ago. Last ping. A cell tower near Blackridge Manor. Mara stared at the data. Nathan wasn't confronting him, she said slowly. He was negotiating. Daniel frowned. Negotiating what? Access. 7:19 p.m. A search of Nathan's apartment revealed something critical. A voice recorder, hidden behind a bookshelf. The last file was timestamped 1:58 a.m. Mara pressed play. Static. Then Nathan's voice. If you're telling the truth, I need proof. A second voice responded. Calm. Measured. You've seen the chamber. That doesn't prove she's alive. A pause. Then, she's more alive than you realize. Mara felt her throat tighten. That's Elliot, Daniel whispered. The recording continued. You can see her, Elliot said. But you must understand. She cannot leave. Why not? Because if she leaves, Elliot replied softly, she'll remember. The recording cut off abruptly. 9:45 p.m. Mara returned once more to Blackridge Manor. Alone. She walked into the hidden chamber again. Studied the chair, the straps, the photographs. Then she noticed something she'd missed before. A second set of scratch marks on the concrete floor. Smaller, more recent, leading away from the chair. Not toward it. She followed them to the far wall, and saw it. A second concealed panel, barely visible. She pressed against it. It shifted. Behind it was a narrow passage, leading upward, to the main floor, to the study, to the safe. Elliot hadn't just built a chamber. He'd built escape routes. and surveillance points. He could watch from inside the walls, listen from behind the vents, disappear at will. Mara exhaled slowly. "He's not protecting her," she murmured. "He's protecting the illusion." 11:11 p.m. Back at the station, Daniel received a call. Anonymous tip. Distorted voice. "He's not running." Daniel stiffened. "Who is this?" "You're looking in the wrong direction." "Where is Elliot Voss?" A pause. "He never left the house." The line went dead. Daniel and Mara stared at each other. They had cleared the manor twice. Thermal scans. Canine units. Nothing. But the secret passages had changed everything. Mara grabbed her coat. "Call tactical," she said. "Why?" "Because if Elliot believes the illusion is breaking." She looked toward the window, toward the distant silhouette of Blackridge Manor against the night sky. He won't let her remember. 12:02 a.m. As police vehicles rolled quietly toward the estate. Inside Blackridge Manor, a floorboard shifted. Behind the study walls. In the DAC, Elliot Voss listened. He held a small radio tuned to police frequency. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't panicked. It was disappointed. "They don't understand," he whispered. From his pocket, he removed a small photograph. "Clara," smiling. "Free. She'll hate me," he said softly. Then he reached for the switch. And somewhere deep within the walls of Blackridge Manor, gas began to flow. 12:14 a.m. The first officer smelled it before anyone saw it. Gas. Faint, but unmistakable. Detective Mara Quinn stepped out of her vehicle halfway up the gravel drive to Blackridge Manor and felt the air catch in her throat. "Kill the engines," she ordered immediately. One by one, patrol cars went silent. The house loomed ahead, dark windows, still facade, perfectly quiet. Too quiet. Daniel Mercer stepped beside her. "He's inside." "Yes," Mara said. "And he wants us to light the match." She grabbed her radio. "All units. No flashlights inside unless necessary. No electronics once we confirm concentration levels. We ventilate first." The tactical team moved fast but carefully. Windows were breached manually. Glass shattered. Cold February air flooded the manor's first floor. Inside, something shifted. A floorboard creaked. 12:21 a.m. Elliot Voss stood inside the hidden passage behind the study. He heard the glass break. He closed his eyes. "They are forcing her into it," he whispered to himself. His hand hovered over a lighter. The gas line switch was already open. The house would become an inferno in minutes if the right spark found oxygen. He wasn't trembling. He was grieving. "They'll make her remember," he said softly. From deeper in the walls came the faint echo of boots entering the foyer. 12:24 a.m. Mara moved through the main hallway with two tactical officers. The manor's interior felt different now, air shifting unnaturally, carrying the metallic tang of gas. "Basement first," she ordered quietly. He built it downward. "He'll think we start there." Daniel peeled off toward the study. He remembered the second concealed passage Mara had found earlier. If Elliot wanted to watch, he'd watch from above. 12:27 a.m. Downstairs, the basement chamber was empty. The bolted chair stood exactly as they'd left it. The photographs of Elliot still lined the wall. But one was missing. The most recent one. Taken just weeks ago. Daniel's voice crackled through Mara's earpiece. "Study wall panels open." Mara didn't hesitate. She sprinted up the stairs. 12:29 a.m. Daniel had his weapon trained on the narrow passage behind the bookshelf. The air inside the cavity was thicker. Gas concentration stronger. "He's in there," Daniel muttered. From within the darkness came a calm voice. "You're early." Mara stepped into view behind Daniel. "Elliot," she said evenly. "It's over." A pause. Then, "I was never hurting her. You locked her in a concrete room for 20 years. I protected her." "From what?" Silence. Then, quietly, from remembering what she did. 12:31 a.m. Mara's breath stilled. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Elliot's silhouette shifted deeper in the narrow passage. "You think I built the chamber because I was afraid of losing her," he said. "I built it because she begged me to." Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. "That's not what she said." "She doesn't know," Elliot replied softly. "Not yet." The smell of gas intensified. Mara felt a flicker of urgency spike in her chest. "Turn off the line, Elliot. She'll remember if she leaves," he insisted. "You'll make her remember the fire." "The fire you set?" A quiet, almost pitying laugh came from the darkness. "You still believe that?" 12:34 a.m. At St. Augustine Medical Center, Clara Whitmore bolted upright in her hospital bed. Her monitors spiked erratically. The nurse rushed in. "It's happening again," Clara whispered. "What is?" "The fire." Her hands began to shake violently. "I can smell it." 12:35 a.m. Back at the manor, Elliot stepped partially into view. His face was gaunt but composed. "You think I was 16 and masterminded a staged death?" he asked. "You think I drugged Margaret Hill alone?" Mara's pulse pounded. "You inherited Clara's estate days after the fire." "Yes. Because she made me beneficiary." The words hit differently this time. Mara didn't respond. Elliot studied her expression. "She knew what she'd done," he said softly. "She knew the only way to survive it was to disappear." "Done what?" Daniel demanded. Elliot's eyes flicked toward the basement below. "She started the fire." 12:37 a.m. Silence crushed the narrow corridor. "You're lying," Mara said carefully. Elliot shook his head. "She thought Margaret Hill was me." The air felt suddenly thin. "What?" Daniel asked. "She found my journals," Elliot said. "The early ones. The Howard ones. She panicked. Thought I was dangerous." "You were," Mara snapped. "I was a child," he replied calmly. "She poured gasoline while I was asleep. I woke up coughing." Mara felt something twist in her gut. "She thought she was killing you," she said slowly. "Yes. And Margaret was in the wrong room." 12:39 a.m. At the hospital, Clara gripped the side rails of her bed. "It wasn't supposed to be her," she cried. The nurse froze. "What wasn't?" "I just wanted him gone." Her voice cracked. "He wasn't my Elliot anymore." 12:40 a.m. In the manor's walls, Elliot's voice remained steady. "I dragged Clara out before the flames spread," he said. "She kept saying she didn't mean it, that she thought it was me upstairs." Daniel looked shaken. "You expect us to believe you covered for attempted murder?" "She would have been charged," Elliot said. "She would have gone to prison. She would have remembered every second of it. So you locked her underground?" Mara demanded. "I gave her what she asked for." Mara's eyes hardened. "Isolation." "Oblivion," Elliot corrected. 12:42 a.m. A tactical officer ran up from downstairs. "Detective, the gas levels are climbing fast." Mara didn't look away from Elliot. "Turn it off." Elliot's gaze flickered, conflicted for the first time. "She can't survive the truth," he said. "That's not your decision." "It is," he replied. "It always has been." 12:44 a.m. At the hospital, Clara began sobbing uncontrollably. "I saw the door," she whispered. "I thought he was inside. I thought he was going to hurt someone." The nurse stepped back. "Who?" "Margaret." The memory struck her fully. Clara's breath hitched. "I killed her." 12:45 a.m. Back in the hidden passage, Mara's radio crackled with the hospital update. She closed her eyes briefly. "She remembers," she said quietly. Elliot went still. The lighter slipped slightly in his hand. "No," he breathed. "She remembers Margaret." The silence that followed felt heavier than the gas in the air. Elliot's shoulders sagged. "It was an accident," he whispered. "You don't get to decide what she can face," Mara said gently now. "She tried to kill you, Elliot. That's trauma. But you don't erase it by burying her." His composure cracked. "You weren't there," he said. "She looked at me like I was a stranger." Mara lowered her weapon slowly. "And so you became one." 12:47 a.m. The tactical officer shouted from the hallway. "Detective, we have to clear out." Mara stepped forward carefully. "Elliot, turn off the gas." His thumb hovered over the lighter. Tears filled his eyes for the first time. "She'll hate me." "Maybe," Mara said softly. "But she'll be free." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, he dropped the lighter and reached behind him. A metallic click echoed faintly through the walls. Somewhere beneath the house, the gas line valve shut. 12:49 a.m. Ventilation continued. Officers secured Elliot Voss without resistance. As they cuffed him, he didn't fight. He didn't argue. He simply asked one question. Will she remember everything? Mara looked at him steadily. Yes. He nodded once, almost relieved. 1:32 a.m. Fire crews completed a final sweep. Blackridge Manor still stood, scarred, but intact. Elliot sat in the back of a squad car, staring at the house. Daniel stood beside Mara. So what is he? Daniel asked quietly. Mara watched the flashing lights reflect in the manor windows. A boy who survived an attempted murder, she said, and grew into a man who thought control was the same thing as protection. And Clara? Mara exhaled slowly. A woman who made one catastrophic mistake and buried herself alive to avoid it. Daniel nodded. No monsters. Mara's gaze drifted back to the dark windows. Only damage. As Elliot's vehicle pulled away, he leaned his head back against the seat. For the first time in 20 years, the walls weren't listening. And somewhere across town, Clara Whitmore stared at the ceiling of a hospital room, tears drying on her cheeks. The fire had finally gone out, but the truth had just begun to burn. 3 months later, Blackridge Manor sat empty. The iron gates were chained, the windows boarded, the estate tied up in legal disputes that would take years to untangle. But inside courtroom 3B, the story was far from over. The gallery was full. Reporters lined the back wall. Legal analysts whispered about precedent. The case had drawn national attention, not just for the shocking confinement, but for what it revealed about trauma, manipulation, and culpability. At the defense table sat Elliot Voss, clean-shaven now, composed, dressed in a navy suit that made him look almost ordinary, almost harmless. Across the aisle, Clara Whitmore waited to be called. She looked smaller than she once had in photographs, frailer, but there was something steadier in her eyes now. She remembered everything. Opening arguments. The prosecution didn't waste time. Ladies and gentlemen, Assistant District Attorney Karen Holt began. This case is not about protection. It is about control. She paced deliberately. For 20 years, the defendant confined Clara Whitmore to a hidden concrete chamber beneath Blackridge Manor. He staged her death. He falsified records. He murdered Nathan Hale to preserve the lie. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Elliot didn't react. Holt continued. He will claim he was protecting her, that she asked to disappear. But even if that were true, no one has the right to erase another human being's autonomy. The defense attorney, Martin Keller, stood slowly when it was his turn. This case, Keller said, is about context. He glanced at Clara. It begins not in that basement chamber, but in a bedroom 20 years ago, filled with gasoline. Silence fell heavy. My client was 16 when Clara Whitmore attempted to kill him. The fire that night killed an innocent woman by mistake. Clara panicked. She begged him to make it go away. Keller's voice softened. And he did. Clara's testimony. When Clara took the stand, the courtroom felt smaller. She raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth. Her fingers trembled, but her voice did not. I tried to kill him, she said plainly. The admission hit the room like a dropped weight. Why? Holt asked carefully. Clara swallowed. I found his journals, the ones where he called himself Howard, where he wrote about protecting me from imaginary enemies. I was afraid he was becoming violent. Was he violent? No. Then why pour gasoline? Clara's composure cracked for a split second, because fear doesn't wait for proof. The room stayed silent. I thought if I ended it then, no one else would get hurt. And Margaret Hill? Holt asked gently. Clara's eyes filled. She was in the wrong room. A long pause. What happened after the fire? Holt asked. Clara looked toward Elliot for the first time. He dragged me out, she said. He could have let me burn. Did he threaten you into hiding? No. Did he force you? Clara hesitated. The entire courtroom leaned forward. No, she said softly. I asked him to. A murmur spread. Why? Because I couldn't live with what I'd done. Cross-examination. Defense Attorney Keller approached slowly. Ms. Whitmore, he began. Did Elliot ever physically harm you? No, Did he provide food, water, medical care? Yes. Did he ever raise his hand to you? No. Did he ever lock the chamber from the outside? Clara hesitated again. Yes. For how long? At first, only when he left the house. And later? She closed her eyes briefly. Longer. Did you ever tell him you wanted to leave? Yes. And what did he say? That I would remember. Was he wrong? Clara's voice was almost a whisper. No. The murder of Nathan Hale. The courtroom shifted tone when the focus turned to Nathan Hale. Ballistics confirmed the bullet recovered from Nathan's body matched a handgun registered to Elliot Voss. Gunshot residue had been found on Elliot's clothing. But the defense presented the recorded audio from Nathan's apartment. You can see her. Elliot's voice echoed in the courtroom speakers. But you must understand. She cannot leave. Holt stood again. And yet, Mr. Voss shot Nathan Hale in your basement. Elliot finally took the stand. His voice was calm. He insisted on taking her out of the house. That's not a capital offense, Holt replied sharply. He threatened to expose everything before I could prepare her. So you killed him? Elliot didn't look away. Yes. No theatrics. No denial. Just fact. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Why? Holt pressed. Because he didn't understand what remembering would do to her. Holt's expression hardened. And you did? Yes. Psychological evaluation. Court-appointed psychologists testified next. Dr. Amelia Raines described Elliot's condition as severe trauma bonding combined with a dissociative savior complex. He experienced an attempted murder at a formative age, she explained. His identity fractured around a historical figure, Howard Blackridge, whom he perceived as misunderstood and protective. And Clara? Holt asked. Clara exhibited prolonged guilt-induced dependency. She initially chose isolation but developed institutionalization and emotional reliance over time. So she wasn't free, Holt summarized. No, Dr. Raines said. But neither was he. The final secret. On the fourth day of trial, Elliot requested to address the court directly. The judge allowed it. Elliot stood. I killed Nathan Hale, he began. I won't pretend otherwise. He glanced briefly toward Clara. But there's something no one has mentioned. The room held its breath. The chamber, he said. It wasn't built for her. Mara, seated behind the prosecution table, felt her stomach tighten. What do you mean? The judge asked. Elliot's gaze was distant now. It was built for me. Silence. When she started remembering, really remembering, I knew she would confess. He looked at Clara. She deserves to. A beat. I opened the passage that night. I turned on the gas because I intended to stay. The room shifted. You were going to kill yourself? Holt asked quietly. Elliot nodded. And destroy the evidence? No, he said. To remove myself from it. He swallowed. The chamber was the only place I ever felt safe. I thought if I died there, it would end with me. Clara began to cry softly. I wasn't trying to burn the house down, Elliot continued. I was trying to stop being the walls. The verdict. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 16 hours. The charges were complex. Second-degree murder for Nathan Hale. Kidnapping. False imprisonment. Arson conspiracy related to the staged death. Clara faced separate charges for involuntary manslaughter related to Margaret Hill's death 20 years prior. When the jury returned, the courtroom was silent enough to hear breath. Elliot Voss was found. Guilty of second-degree murder. Guilty of false imprisonment. Not guilty of kidnapping, based on Clara's initial consent. Guilty of evidence tampering related to the staged death. Clara Whitmore was found. Guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Sentenced to time served, factoring diminished capacity and psychological trauma. Elliot received a sentence of 35 years. No possibility of parole before 25. Aftermath. As deputies led Elliot away, he stopped briefly beside Clara. He didn't touch her, didn't speak loudly. He simply said, "You don't have to hide anymore." Clara nodded through tears. For the first time in 20 years, there were no walls between them. Epilogue. Blackridge Manor was eventually demolished. The land cleared. Nothing remained but foundation stones and court records. Mara Quinn stood at the empty lot months later, hands in her coat pockets. Daniel joined her. "Think they'll build something new here?" he asked. "Eventually." "Do you think he loved her?" Mara looked at the open sky where the manor once stood. "Yes," she said. "And that was the problem." Daniel nodded slowly. No ghosts lingered. No secret chambers remained. Just the quiet reminder that sometimes, the most dangerous prisons aren't built from concrete. They are built from fear. 5 years later, the land where Blackridge Manor once stood was almost unrecognizable. The estate had been demolished 2 summers after the trial. Developers had planned luxury homes, then backed out when buyers protested. Eventually, the property was purchased by the county and converted into a small memorial park, officially dedicated to Margaret Hill and Nathan Hale. Unofficially, everyone still called it Blackridge. Detective Mara Quinn stood at the edge of the clearing, hands tucked into her coat pockets. The air smelled like rain. Daniel Mercer joined her, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "They finally planted over the foundation," he said, nodding toward the stretch of fresh grass where the basement chamber once existed. Mara took the coffee. "You can still see the outline if you know where to look." Daniel gave a faint smile. "Do you?" "Yes." Clara Whitmore, 5 years later. Clara lived in a quiet coastal town 3 hours away now. New name. Court approved. Small house. Large windows. No basement. She volunteered twice a week at a crisis counseling center, working specifically with trauma survivors. She never mentioned her past. But sometimes, during late evenings, when the wind rattled her windows, she would sit very still, listening. Not because she expected walls to speak, but because for 20 years, they had. Therapy had helped. So had time. But guilt was a different architecture. It didn't collapse easily. Elliot Voss, year 5. Elliot adjusted well to prison. Too well. That's what unsettled the corrections psychologist. He followed routines meticulously, kept his cell immaculate, spent hours in the library, avoided conflict. He never denied what he had done, never justified it again. But he also never expressed regret in the way people expected. When asked if he felt remorse for Nathan Hale's death, he answered, "Yes." When asked why, he said, "Because I miscalculated. Not because it was wrong. Because it failed." Dr. Raines requested continued evaluation. "His need for control hasn't disappeared," she wrote in her report. "It has simply found new boundaries." The letter. In the 5th year of his sentence, Clara received a letter. No return address. But she recognized the handwriting immediately. She sat at her kitchen table for a full hour before opening it. The paper inside was crisp. Careful. Deliberate. "Clara, I am told I am supposed to stop writing you. I understand why. But there is something you deserve to know. The chamber is gone. The house is gone. The walls are gone. But the night of the fire is not what you remember. You were not alone when you poured the gasoline." Her hands began to shake. Not alone. She read it again. And again. And again. Mara Quinn, the reopened file. Mara was promoted 2 years after the trial. But she never archived the Blackridge case fully. There were inconsistencies she had never reconciled. The incomplete fire report. The missing autopsy summary. The dentist who verified dental records and retired abruptly. And now, a call from Clara. Mara listened quietly as Clara read the letter aloud over the phone. "You think he's manipulating you," Mara said carefully. "I don't know," Clara replied. "But I don't remember anyone else in that house." "That doesn't mean there wasn't." Silence stretched. "Do you think he'd lie now?" Clara asked. Mara didn't answer immediately. "No," she said finally. "I think he'd distort. The forgotten detail." Mara reopened the archived fire department logs. This time, she focused not on the body, but on the responders. There had been 3 firefighters first on scene. 2 still worked locally. 1 transferred the following year. Now retired. Name, Thomas Kessler. Mara scheduled a visit. Thomas Kessler's memory. Kessler lived in a modest ranch house outside town. He answered the door slowly, leaning on a cane. When Mara showed her badge and mentioned the Whitmore fire, something shifted in his expression. "I wondered when someone would come back," he said. They sat at his kitchen table. What do you remember? Mara asked. Kessler exhaled heavily. I remember a boy outside the house, covered in soot. Calm. Elliot. Yes. And I remember him saying there was someone else inside. Mara leaned forward. But the report only lists Margaret Hill. Kessler nodded. That's because when we searched the structure the second time, there wasn't anyone. Second time. He swallowed. The first time we entered, I saw movement upstairs. Thought it was heat distortion. And the second. The staircase had collapsed. Mara felt her pulse quicken. Are you saying you saw someone besides Margaret? Kessler's jaw tightened. I'm saying I saw a shadow that didn't match the layout. The blueprint discrepancy. Mara pulled the original rental house blueprints. There was something odd. An addition built 5 years before the fire. A small attic crawl space above the second bedroom. It wasn't in the fire department's structural notes. And it hadn't been searched thoroughly due to collapse risk. If someone had been hiding there, they might have survived long enough to escape before responders secured the perimeter. Clara's fracture. When Mara presented the possibility to Clara, the reaction wasn't relief. It was horror. I don't remember, Clara whispered. I remember arguing with Elliot earlier that evening. I remember pouring gasoline. I remember lighting it. Do you remember anyone else? Mara asked. No. What about visitors? Tenants besides Margaret? Clara closed her eyes. And then, a flicker. A face. Young. Female. She had red hair, Clara said suddenly. Mara's breath caught. Who? I don't know. The missing person. 3 weeks after the Whitmore fire, a 17-year-old girl named Lily Armitage was reported missing. Her last known location, the same neighborhood. The case had gone cold within months. No connection had ever been drawn. Until now. Mara stared at the old photograph of Lily Armitage. Red hair. Sharp jawline. Age 17. The same age Elliot had been. Prison interview, year 5. Mara sat across from Elliot in the visitation room. He looked older now. Thinner. But his eyes were unchanged. You sent Clara a letter, Mara said. Yes. You wrote she wasn't alone the night of the fire. He nodded once. Who else was there? Elliot folded his hands neatly on the table. You already know. Say it. Lily. Mara felt the room tilt slightly. What happened to her? Elliot's gaze didn't waver. She came looking for me. Why? She read my journals. And? She thought I was fascinating. A chill slid down Mara's spine. Was she in the house when Clara lit the fire? Yes. Where? The attic crawl space. Did she survive? A long pause. Then, yes. Mara's heart pounded. Where is she now? Elliot tilted his head slightly. That's the interesting part. The twist. Lily Armitage had not been a victim. She had been a believer. Like Elliot. Like Clara. She had idolized the Howard persona. And when Clara attempted to burn the house, Lily had hidden. She escaped before firefighters sealed the perimeter. And disappeared. Not because she died, but because she chose to. Mara's mind raced. If Lily survived, she said carefully, why stay silent? Elliot smiled faintly. Because she understood. Understood what? That some fires are cleaner than the truth. The unsettling reality. Back at her desk, Mara stared at Lily's old missing person file. No sightings in 20 years. No financial activity under her name. No death certificate. Nothing. Daniel stood in the doorway. You look like you've seen a ghost. Mara didn't look up. Worse, she said. What? Someone who learned how to disappear. Final scene. That night, miles away from Blackridge. In a small town with a different name. A woman with red hair stood at a kitchen sink. She turned off the faucet. Dried her hands. On the refrigerator door was a photograph. Blackridge Manor. Before it burned. She touched the image lightly. Then opened a drawer. Inside was a folded newspaper clipping. Headline. Elliot Voss sentenced to 35 years. She smiled faintly, and whispered to the empty room. He finally stopped protecting us. 6 months after Mara reopened the Whitmore fire file, the first envelope arrived. No return address. No postage stamp, hand-delivered. It was waiting on her desk when she arrived at 6:12 a.m. Inside was a single photograph. Blackridge Manor. Before the fire. But something was different. In the upstairs attic window, a faint shape stood behind the glass. Red hair catching the light. Mara stared at it for a long time. Then she turned the photo over. Written in neat, careful ink. You missed the highest room. Lily Armitage, the ghost who lived. The original missing persons report described Lily as intelligent, withdrawn, creative, fascinated with obscure historical figures. Her parents had believed she ran away. Her teachers described her as impressionable. Mara now saw something else. Suggestible, drawn to mythology, drawn to Eliot's invented persona, Howard reborn. If Clara represented guilt and Eliot represented control, Lily represented belief. And belief was harder to dismantle than either. Prison, interview 2. Mara sat across from Eliot again. This time, she placed the photograph on the table. His eyes flickered briefly. You didn't send this, she asked. No. You know who did. A faint smile. She likes to be seen when she chooses. She's contacting me. That means she's ready. For what? Eliot leaned back. For you to understand. Mara's patience thinned. Understand what? That she was never hiding. The attic truth. Fire department records showed the attic crawl space had partially collapsed during suppression efforts. Too unstable to enter. The official report assumed no access point survived. But Mara re-examined the structure diagrams. There had been a narrow exterior vent opening, large enough for a small person. Large enough for a 17-year-old girl to escape unseen during chaos. If Lily fled that night, she would have been alone. Witness to Clara's attempted murder. Witness to Eliot dragging Clara from the flames. Witness to Margaret Hill's body upstairs. And then, free. Free to decide what story survived. Clara's reaction. When Mara showed Clara the photograph, her reaction was immediate and visceral. She was real, Clara whispered. You remember her? Clara's hands trembled. She came by the house once. Said she was doing a school project on local history. She asked about Eliot. What did you tell her? That he was troubled. Clara pressed her palms together. She looked at him like he was extraordinary. Do you remember her being there the night of the fire? Clara's breathing quickened. I remember shouting. I remember gasoline. I remember Eliot screaming. She squeezed her eyes shut. And I remember another scream. Higher. Not his. Mara felt the room go cold. The second envelope. 3 days later, another envelope arrived. Inside, a copy of Lily Armitage's missing person poster. Across it, written in red ink, not missing, evolving. Mara called Daniel immediately. She wants contact, he said. No, Mara replied. She wants acknowledgement. The first sighting. A tip came from a librarian in a neighboring state. A woman matching Lily's age progression had been using the name Lila Hart. She attended lectures on obscure industrial history. Specifically, Howard Blackridge. Mara drove 3 hours to the small university hosting the lecture series. She didn't know what she expected. Remorse. Instability. Anger. Instead, she found composure. Lila Hart. The woman stood near the back of the auditorium after the lecture ended. Red hair pulled back neatly. Professional. Calm. Mid-30s. She noticed Mara immediately. You're late, Lila said. Mara didn't pretend. Lily Armitage. A faint smile. That name burned. You were in the attic the night of the fire. Yes. You watched Margaret Hill die. A pause. Yes. You watched Clara try to kill Eliot. Yes. You said nothing. Lila's eyes were steady. Why would I? Mara's jaw tightened. Because an innocent woman died. Lila tilted her head slightly. Innocent. She had nothing to do with it. She rented a room in a house full of delusion, Lila replied calmly. That's proximity. That's not guilt. Everything is proximity, Lila said. Fire spreads. The philosophy of survival. They sat in the empty auditorium. Mara studied her carefully. You idolized Eliot, Mara said. I understood him. He built a prison. He built containment. For Clara. For chaos. Mara leaned forward. And what did you build? Lila smiled faintly. Myself. The confession that wasn't. Mara pushed further. Did you help him stage Clara's death? No. Did you help him build the chamber? No. Did you ever live at Blackridge Manor? Lila's expression softened slightly. For a while. Mara's pulse jumped. After the fire? Yes. The air shifted. Elliot didn't lock Clara in that chamber alone, Mara said slowly. No. Who helped him? Lila met her gaze without blinking. She did. The unraveling. According to Lily. After the fire, Clara's guilt was immediate and consuming. She insisted on disappearing. Not because Elliot forced her, but because she feared herself. She said she could do it again, Lila explained calmly, if she felt threatened. So Elliot built the chamber. Yes. And you? I observed. You were a teenager. I was choosing. Mara's frustration sharpened. You let them live underground for 20 years. I let adults make adult decisions. And Nathan Hale. Lila's expression didn't change. He was reckless. Did you encourage Elliot to kill him? No. Did you stop him? A pause. No. The final question. Why contact me now? Mara asked. Lila stood. Because the story is wrong. In what way? You think Elliot was the architect. He was. Lila shook her head gently. No. He was the wall. Mara felt unease creep up her spine. Explain. Lila stepped closer. Clara created the fire. Elliot created the chamber. I created the silence. Silence filled the space between them. And silence, Lila said softly, is the strongest structure of all. The threat. As Mara left the auditorium, Lila called after her. You should stop digging. Why? Because if you expose every truth, Lila said calmly, you'll realize no one in that house was innocent. Mara turned. Are you threatening me? No, Lila replied. I'm warning you. Prison, Elliot's realization. Weeks later, Elliot received a visitor. Lila. He looked surprised, but not afraid. You went to her, he said quietly. Yes. She won't understand. She understands more than you did. Elliot studied her face. You're not angry. No. You're not afraid. No. A long silence passed. She was the only one who chose freely, Elliot murmured. Lila smiled faintly. Yes. Closing scene. That night, Mara sat alone in her office. 3 files lay open in front of her. Clara Whitmore, attempted murder. Elliot Voss, control masked as protection. Lily Armitage, silence masked as survival. All guilty. All victims. All architects. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. A familiar, calm voice spoke. You still think I'm the worst of us? Mara didn't ask who it was. No, she said quietly. A pause. Good, Lila replied. The line went dead. Some prisons are built from concrete. Some from guilt. Some from obsession. And some from the choice to look away. It started with smoke. Not at Blackridge. Not anywhere near it. 3 states away, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a house caught fire at 2:11 a.m. By 2:19 a.m., flames had consumed the attic. By 2:47 a.m., firefighters declared the structure unstable. 1 body was recovered. Female. Mid-30s. Red hair. 6:02 a.m. Mara was halfway through her first coffee when the call came in. Daniel didn't bother with pleasantries. You need to see this. 20 minutes later, Mara stood over the preliminary report. The victim's temporary ID read, Lila Hart. Legal name pending confirmation. Mara's chest tightened. Cause? She asked. Accelerant detected in the upstairs hallway, Daniel replied. Gasoline. Her stomach dropped. Any witnesses? 1 neighbor said she heard shouting before the explosion. Male or female? Couldn't tell. Mara stared at the single crime scene photo sent over from the out-of-state department. The attic was the epicenter. Again, the detail that shouldn't exist. 2 days later, official identification confirmed the victim was indeed Lily Armitage. Dental records matched. Fingerprints matched. The body was severely burned, but not beyond recognition. But one detail caught Mara's eye. On the living room wall, firefighters had found something written in soot. 3 words. You missed one. Mara felt her pulse begin to climb. She hadn't told anyone about the photograph Lily sent. Or the note that read, you missed the highest room. Prison, emergency visit. Mara didn't schedule the prison interview. She demanded it. Elliot Voss entered the visitation room with his usual calm. But when he saw Mara's expression, something shifted. She's dead, Mara said flatly. Elliot's face drained of color. No. House fire. Gasoline. Attic. He didn't blink. That's not possible. She's been identified. Elliot's breathing grew shallow. You're wrong. I wish I was. He leaned forward suddenly. She wouldn't burn. Mara's voice sharpened. She did. No, Elliot whispered. She wouldn't let fire take her. The question. Did you contact her? Mara asked. No. Did you send anyone? No. Did you tell anyone about her? Silence. Then. She contacted me once, he admitted quietly. When? 6 months ago. What did she say? That the story wasn't finished. Mara's skin prickled. Did she mention anyone else? Elliot hesitated, then nodded. She said there was a 4th. The 4th. Mara felt the room tilt. A 4th what? Witness, Elliot said. Who? I don't know. She wouldn't say. When did this 4th person exist? Elliot's eyes drifted slightly. The night of the fire. Mara's pulse thundered. There were only 4 people in the house, she said carefully. You, Clara, Margaret, Lily. Elliot's gaze snapped back to hers. That's what you think. The original scene, revisited. Mara reopened every file connected to the Whitmore fire. Forensics. Fire patterns. Witness accounts. Then she found it. A notation buried in the back of the incident report. Unidentified footprint located near rear exterior vent. Size inconsistent with known occupants. The print had been dismissed as a responding firefighters, but the timestamp placed it before perimeter containment, which meant someone else had exited the house before responders arrived. The neighbor. Mara tracked down an elderly neighbor who still lived on the street where the Whitmore house once stood. It took hours before the woman's memory shifted from vague to focused. There was a car, she said finally. What kind? Old sedan. Beige maybe. Who was driving? I don't know, but someone ran to it. Male or female? The neighbor squinted. Small. Maybe a girl. Red hair? No. Dark. The pattern. Mara began mapping missing persons reports from the year of the Whitmore fire. Within a 5-mile radius, 2 teenage girls had gone missing within months. Lily Armitage. N. Tessa Morgan. Age 16. Dark hair. Last seen walking home from school. Never found. The impossible connection. Mara dug deeper into Tessa Morgan's background. Her father had worked construction. Specifically, renovation projects, including the Whitmore rental property's attic addition 5 years before the fire. If Tessa had access to the crawl space, if she knew about it, if she had been inside that night, then Lily wasn't the only witness. And perhaps, Lily wasn't the architect of silence. The autopsy. 3 weeks after Lily's supposed death, the full autopsy returned. Mara read it twice, then a 3rd time. Cause of death, smoke inhalation. But there were no defensive wounds, no soot in the lower lungs, and no traces of accelerant on her clothing. The gasoline had been poured after she was already unconscious. Or dead. Mara leaned back slowly, and then she saw the final note. Dental records matched. But fingerprints were partial, incomplete due to burn damage. Confirmation confidence, 87%. Not 100%. Mara sat across from Elliot again. They are not certain it was her, she said. He studied her carefully. You're beginning to understand. Understand what? That Lily never lost control of the narrative. You think she faked her death? Elliot didn't answer. Instead, he asked, did they find accelerant on her hands? Mara's silence was answer enough. He nodded slowly. She would never choose fire for herself. The package. 2 nights later, a small package arrived at Clara Whitmore's home. Inside, a key. Old. Rusty. Attached to a tag that read, "Highest room." Clara called Mara immediately. "I don't have an attic," Clara whispered. "Not in your house," Mara replied quietly. The location. There was only one structure left connected to the Blackridge estate. A storage warehouse purchased under an LLC 5 years before the trial. Owned quietly through shell companies. Ultimately traced back to Lily Armitage. Mara stood outside the building at dusk. Metal siding. No windows except a narrow one near the roofline. The highest room. She called for backup, but something in her told her. Lily wanted her to enter first. Inside, the warehouse smelled like dust and old paper. Rows of boxes lined the walls. Photographs, documents, blueprints, newspaper clippings, all meticulously catalogued. Not just Blackridge, other fires, other disappearances, other stories where trauma, guilt, and control intersected. At the far end of the warehouse was a staircase, leading upward, to a small enclosed loft. The highest room. Mara climbed slowly, her pulse steady. At the top, a single desk, a lamp, and a photograph taped to the wall. Blackridge Manor, before the fire. But this time, in the attic window, 2 silhouettes stood. Not one. Mara felt her breath hitch. Behind her, a soft voice spoke. "You're close." She turned slowly, and there she was. Red hair, unburned, unshaken, alive. Lily Armitage smiled faintly. "You finally looked up." The loft was smaller than Mara expected. Low ceiling. One desk. One lamp. One woman who was supposed to be dead. Lily Armitage stood with her hands loosely clasped in front of her, as if this were a polite meeting arranged weeks in advance instead of the unraveling of a crime that spanned years. "You're trespassing," Lily said gently. Mara didn't move. "You're alive." "Yes." "You burned a house down." "Yes." "You let them identify another body as you." Lily tilted her head slightly. They were eager to close the file. The calmness in her voice made Mara's pulse spike harder than any shout would have. "Who was in that house?" Mara asked. Lily's gaze drifted to the photograph on the wall, the one showing Blackridge Manor's attic window. "You already know." "The body in the fire." "It wasn't random," Mara said. "You think I'd risk that?" Lily replied. "Yes." Lily smiled faintly. "No. I needed the world to believe I was finished. Not hunted." "Hunted by who?" Lily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped aside and motioned to the desk. On it sat a folder labeled, "Tessa Morgan." Mara's throat tightened. "You found her name," Lily said. "She disappeared months after the Whitmore fire." "She didn't disappear," Lily replied softly. "She survived." Mara stared at her. "That's not possible." "She was in the attic that night." The crawl space. Lily moved to the far wall and pressed her palm against it. A hidden panel slid slightly open, revealing blueprints. Blackridge Manor's original design. Then an addition drawn in later. The attic renovation created a secondary crawl space, Lily said. Small. Accessible only from behind the insulation. Mara remembered the fire report. Accelerant in the hallway. Rapid vertical burn. If someone had been above the ignition point. They could survive, Mara finished. Yes. Why didn't she come forward? Lily's expression darkened for the first time. She tried. The attempt. 3 weeks after the Whitmore fire, an anonymous tip had been phoned into the local police department. It was logged, then dismissed as a prank. The caller claimed she had seen someone leave the house before the fire spread. The call had been traced to a payphone near an abandoned strip mall. Security footage had shown a teenage girl with dark hair. The footage was corrupted. The case file labeled the tip as unreliable. That was her, Mara whispered. Yes. Why didn't she go public? Because someone found her first. The threat. Lily's voice shifted, less steady now. Tessa came to me. Mara's head snapped up. You knew her. She found me, Lily corrected. She said she had been inside Blackridge that night. Doing what? Hiding. From what? Lily's eyes flickered. From her father. Mara's stomach dropped. Tessa's father. The construction contractor. The man who renovated the attic. The real architect. He knew about the crawl space, Mara said slowly. Yes. He built it. Yes. And he knew Tessa used it. Lily nodded once. He would bring her there when he worked late. He said it was safe. Quiet. Mara felt something cold move through her chest. And the night of the fire. He wasn't supposed to be there. Was he? Lily didn't answer. But she didn't need to. The fourth person. There were 4 people inside the house that night, Mara said. You're wrong, Lily replied softly. There were 5. Mara's mind reeled. Elliot, Clara, Margaret, you, Tessa, and him. The man no one named. Tessa Morgan's father had been interviewed briefly after her disappearance. He had an alibi. Clocked in at work. Security logs confirmed it. Except, construction logs at the Whitmore property showed access codes had been changed the week before the fire. By a subcontractor. One hired by Tessa's father. If he was there, Mara said carefully, why wasn't he caught in the blaze? Because he left before it spread. Before or after it started. Lily held her gaze. You tell me. The confession that wasn't. Mara replayed Elliot Voss's trial testimony in her mind. He had admitted to starting the fire. But only after a confrontation. He never specified who. The prosecution filled in the blanks. Clara's parents. A domestic dispute. But what if? He saw someone, Mara murmured. Yes. Someone in the attic. Yes. And he thought that the house wasn't empty. Mara's breathing grew shallow. Elliot had always maintained the fire escalated faster than expected. If he believed someone else was inside, he would have panicked. Why fake your death? You staged your death because of Tessa, Mara said. Because of her father, Lily corrected. Is he alive? Yes. Where is he? Still building. Mara's jaw tightened. You've been tracking him. For years. And the other fires? Mara asked. Warnings. Mara felt a surge of anger. You endangered people. I chose abandoned properties. That house 3 states away wasn't abandoned. Lily's expression faltered. It was supposed to be. The mistake. The body found in the fire. Who was she? Mara demanded. Lily's voice dropped. I don't know. The words hung heavy. You don't know. I set the fire after I received confirmation the house was empty. It wasn't. Lily's hands trembled for the first time. That wasn't supposed to happen. Mara felt fury mix with something colder. You wanted control, she said. Yes. You wanted to finish the story. Yes. You became the thing you were afraid of. Lily swallowed. Yes. The photograph. Mara stepped toward the photo taped to the wall. 2 silhouettes in the attic window. One of them is Tessa, Mara said. Yes. And the other? Lily's eyes softened. She wouldn't tell me. Mara turned slowly. You don't know. I never saw the second face. The memory. Tessa had described that night once. Briefly. Fragments. There was shouting downstairs. Then smoke. And someone else in the dark. Not Elliot. Not Clara. Not her father. Someone older. Watching. Waiting. The possibility. Mara's mind reeled. If there was a 6th person. Someone who never came forward. Someone who escaped unseen. Someone who might have ignited the accelerant. Or taken advantage of the chaos. Then Elliot's confession might not have been the full truth. Why didn't Tessa testify? Mara asked. She was afraid, Lily said. Of her father? Yes. And of the other one. Footsteps below. A sound echoed faintly from the warehouse floor below. Back up. Mara had signaled them 15 minutes earlier. Lily heard it too. You always bring reinforcements, Lily said softly. Yes. Good. Lily stepped back toward the staircase. You can arrest me. I will. But you'll still be missing a piece. Tell me, Mara demanded. Lily paused at the top step. The second silhouette. Who is it? Lily met her eyes. The only person who never testified. Mara's stomach dropped. Margaret Whitmore died in the fire. Lily shook her head slowly. No, she whispered. She didn't. The impossible claim. The official record stated that Margaret Whitmore's body had been recovered from the master bedroom. Dental confirmation, positive. But the autopsy report, burn damage extensive. Facial features destroyed. Identification reliant on dental work. Records provided by her husband, who died 2 years later in a boating accident. Mara's mind raced. You're saying Margaret survived. I'm saying someone else burned in that bedroom. And Margaret left. When? Before the flames spread. With who? Lily's voice was barely audible now. With the second silhouette. The revelation. Footsteps thundered up the metal stairs. Officers entered the loft. Weapons drawn. Lily raised her hands calmly. Mara didn't look away from her. If Margaret Whitmore is alive, Mara said quietly, why stay silent for 20 years? Lily smiled faintly. Because she didn't stay silent. Mara's heart pounded. What do you mean? Lily nodded toward the desk. On it, a stack of newspaper clippings. One name circled repeatedly. A well-known philanthropist. A woman who funded fire victim recovery programs across the state. A woman who never gave interviews about her past. A woman with carefully styled hair. Now blonde. But once. Dak. Margaret Whitmore hadn't died in Blackridge Manor. She had reinvented herself. And she had been watching. Officers placed Lily in cuffs. As they led her down the stairs, she looked back once. You were right about one thing, she said softly. Mara didn't respond. Lily smiled faintly. There was always someone in the highest room. The sun was low when Mara Quinn finally arrived at the new address tied to Margaret Whitmore. A sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city. Its exterior pristine, almost sterile. Lush gardens. Security cameras. A wrought iron gate. Everything about it screamed control, order, reinvention. Inside, Margaret waited in the drawing room. Blonde hair, soft features, but eyes that held the weight of decades and secrets no one could touch. Mara stepped inside, her badge visible, voice calm but firm. Margaret Whitmore. She smiled faintly. Yes, and I've been expecting you. The confrontation. Mara wasted no time. 20 years ago, you were supposedly dead. The fire. Blackridge Manor. The chamber. The confessions. All of it. Margaret sipped tea carefully. Reported deaths make excellent camouflage, she said softly. You've been hiding. I've been surviving. Mara felt a chill. Surviving while other people suffered. Margaret set her cup down. They weren't suffering because of me. They were suffering because of themselves. Mara narrowed her eyes. You let Clara Whitmore live in that basement chamber for 20 years. Margaret's lips curved faintly. I didn't let her. She chose it. Chose it. Mara's voice rose. Yes, fear can be an excellent architect. Sometimes walls exist long before they are built. The truth about the fire. Mara's mind raced back to the autopsy reports, the footprints, Lily Armitage's files. You staged the body, Mara said slowly. Margaret's eyes softened, just a fraction. The fire needed a face. That face wasn't mine. Who was it? Margaret shook her head. You'll never know. And it doesn't matter. Mara's patience was thinning. Do you realize how many lives this affected? Clara Whitmore, Elliot Voss, Lily Armitage, Tessa Morgan. How many innocent people could have died because of your silence? Margaret's gaze didn't waver. Innocence is a choice, detective. Survival is a strategy. The final puzzle. Mara pulled out the photograph Lily had sent years ago, the one showing two silhouettes in the attic window of Blackridge Manor. Who is the second silhouette? Mara asked. Margaret's lips curved in a knowing smile. You already know. I don't. You do. It was me. Mara felt the world tilt slightly. You were in the attic the night of the fire. Margaret's voice was calm, almost tender. I stayed hidden. I waited to see who would take the risk, who would choose action, and who would choose silence. And Lily, Tessa, Clara, Elliot, they all made their choices, Margaret said. I merely observed. And now? Margaret rose, standing taller than her years suggested. Now, the story ends. But only because it needs to end on my terms. The reckoning. Mara didn't flinch. You can't escape consequences forever, she said. I've already lived them, Margaret replied. And so has everyone else. But people died, Mara said, her voice sharp. They would have lived differently if not for fear, Margaret said. But living differently isn't living better. Mara paused. She realized she couldn't argue. Not fully. The twisted chain of events, Clara's guilt, Elliot's obsession, Lily's silence, Tessa's hiding, had all converged into a system beyond her control. Why now? Mara asked. Because the highest room isn't about hiding, Margaret said. It's about seeing, observing, understanding. And what have you understood? That no one is ever entirely innocent, and no one is ever entirely guilty. Closure. Mara left the estate hours later, notebook filled with statements and photographs. She called Daniel. They're all alive, she said quietly. Or at least, we know where they are. And Elliot? Still in prison. But his changed. His waiting. Daniel sighed. And Lily? She's out there, Mara said. Still choosing. Still observing. The last rays of sunlight fell over the city skyline. Mara thought of Blackridge Manor, its walls, its hidden rooms, the lives it had touched, the stories it had swallowed. Some prisons, she realized, were not built from bricks or concrete. They were built from fear, from guilt, from choices no one dared to make. And some rooms, like the highest room, were built from the quiet understanding that sometimes the only way to survive is to watch, and wait, and let others decide for themselves. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Blackridge Memorial Park officially opened. Visitors walked over the foundations, unaware of the secrets buried beneath the soil. Clara Whitmore volunteered nearby, counseling trauma survivors. Elliot Voss remained in prison, studied and calm. And somewhere, beyond the reach of law or surveillance, Lily Armitage, red hair untamed, mind sharp, continued to walk freely, a silent witness to the highest room, observing the world and the choices of those around her. The story of Blackridge Manor was over. But the echoes of its walls, its fires, and its witnesses would never truly fade. Story 2. Grey Harbor was a town that didn't appear on most maps. Nestled on a jagged stretch of coastline, it was a place where the fog rolled in every morning like clockwork, swallowing the harbor, the docks, and sometimes, even the people. The locals told stories, old legends about ships disappearing overnight, fishermen who never returned, and lights bobbing in the mist that shouldn't exist. Outsiders dismissed them as tales to scare tourists. But for Detective Julian Cross, Grey Harbor's fog carried more than salt water and chill. It carried secrets. It all began one Tuesday morning in late October. The fog was thick, clinging to the cobblestones and the wooden piers. Julian had just stepped into the tiny Grey Harbor Police Department office when the call came through. A child had gone missing. Her name, Emily Hartley. 12 years old. Last seen walking her dog near the edge of the old lighthouse, a crumbling structure perched on the cliffs overlooking the sea. Witnesses reported seeing her talking to someone, a man in a dark coat, but in the fog, they couldn't describe him. By the time the first responders arrived, there was no sign of Emily. Just her dog, standing silently at the lighthouse's base, staring out to the misted horizon. Julian drove to the scene, heart pounding. The lighthouse loomed above, its whitewashed walls streaked with salt and neglect. The fog swirled like smoke, making the air feel alive, almost breathing. He knelt by the dog, crouching down to its level. The animal whimpered, tail stiff. No blood, no footprints leading away from the cliffs. Nothing except a small silver locket clasped in the dog's collar, a heart-shaped charm engraved with the initials E.H. Julian felt the first prickle of unease. The locket wasn't unusual, it was hers, but it was closed, sealed shut. Inside, no photograph, no note, nothing. And yet, it felt like a message. Because in Grey Harbor, the fog didn't just hide things. Sometimes, it revealed them. Across town, the Hartley family sat huddled around their fireplace. Emily's mother, Caroline, clutched a hand-knit blanket, rocking back and forth. Her father, Thomas, stared blankly at the window. She wouldn't just run off, Caroline whispered. She's 12, Thomas said. What if it's someone we know? The thought made them both shiver. Meanwhile, Julian stood at the edge of the cliffs, scanning the mist with a flashlight. He noticed the shape first, a faint silhouette that vanished as soon as he blinked. No footprints. No movement. Only the sound of waves crashing and the fog whispering over the rocks. He called it in, Unit 7, be advised. Possible visual on missing child, but nothing solid. Nobody responded, because in Grey Harbor, nothing was ever solid. By nightfall, the town's uneasy peace had cracked. Parents drew curtains. Shopkeepers shuttered doors early. Rumors began circulating. A stranger had been seen near the lighthouse at dawn. A man, tall, black coat, pale skin. Some claimed he moved like he was floating, untouched by the fog or wind. Julian made his rounds, but the lighthouse was empty, save for the dog in the locket. He pocketed the charm and took the animal home. The first rule of Grey Harbor, he reminded himself, was simple: never underestimate the fog. Because tomorrow, the fog would return. And with it, the whispers. And Julian knew, deep down, Emily Hartley might not be the only one to vanish. The morning after Emily Hartley disappeared, Grey Harbor was quieter than usual. The fog had rolled in overnight, thicker and heavier, curling around the docks like a living thing. Julian Cross stepped into the police station, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, his coat still damp from the mist. Coffee had already gone cold in his cup, but he didn't care. The town's unease had spread through the precinct like a virus, and he could feel it even before the first call. "Morning, Julian," Officer Denny said, lowering a stack of files onto the desk. "No sign of Emily yet. Her dog's still at the station. Can't get it to calm down." Julian nodded, staring at the leash tangled around the collar. The dog's ears twitched nervously at every creak of the floorboards. "Good," he muttered. "Keep her calm. Feed her, keep her hydrated. She might be the only clue we have." Denny frowned. "You really think a dog can help?" "Sometimes they sense things humans can't," Julian replied, grabbing his coat. "I'm heading back to the lighthouse. I need to walk the path she took, step by step." The lighthouse trail. The lighthouse sat perched on jagged cliffs, its white walls streaked with years of salt and neglect. Julian knew every creak in its wooden floors, every stone along the cliff path. But today, it felt different, ominous. The fog was low, so thick he could barely see the rocks a few feet ahead. He pulled his flashlight from his coat and clicked it on, the beam cutting a thin line through the gray haze. He noticed something immediately: footprints. Small, likely a child's, leading toward the edge of the cliffs. But then they disappeared. Not blurred. Not covered. Gone. Just vanished as if swallowed by the mist itself. Julian crouched down, inspecting the ground. There were no prints beside them, no drag marks. Emily's leash was nowhere in sight. He straightened up, scanning the horizon. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Soft, careful, almost rhythmic. Not on the cliffs. Behind him, closer than they should have been in the fog. "Emily," he called, voice steady despite the rapid beat of his heart. No reply. Just the crunch of gravel under invisible feet. Julian's instinct screamed. He flicked his flashlight around. Nothing. Only fog and the faint outline of the lighthouse. A whisper floated through the mist. "Julian Cross." He froze. The first witness. By mid-morning, word had spread through the town. Emily's disappearance had become the center of every conversation. Julian went to the Hartleys' home to update them. Caroline Hartley met him at the door, eyes red from crying. Thomas followed behind her, silent, fists clenched. "We've heard rumors," Caroline said. "People are saying someone's been seen near the lighthouse. A man in a black coat. Tall. Pale." Julian nodded. "Yes. That's consistent with witness reports. I need to ask you about Emily's routines. Did she ever mention anyone she met near the lighthouse?" Caroline shook her head. "No. She'd been fascinated with the lighthouse lately, but nothing else. Just exploring, I think. She loved the fog." Julian scribbled notes, frowning. The fog was a natural cover. Whoever had taken Emily, or whoever she had encountered, had chosen the perfect place to vanish. Uncovering the stranger. Later that afternoon, Julian reviewed security footage from nearby businesses. Most cameras captured little more than fog, swaying signs, and vague shadows. Then he found it, a dark figure, moving against the morning mist. Tall, coat flapping. Pale face partially hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. The figure walked slowly, deliberately. Every few steps, it paused, scanning the fog, as if searching for someone or something. Julian froze. The person's stride was familiar, but he couldn't place it. He paused the footage, zooming in. Eyes, dark, unreadable, stared back. This isn't just an abduction, Julian muttered. This is calculated. Tessa Morgan. During his investigation, Julian learned of another girl, Tessa Morgan. She had gone missing 15 years ago in a neighboring coastal town, also near a lighthouse. Her case had gone cold. Julian dug through old reports and found the similarities. Fog, isolated cliffside structures, mysterious man reported nearby. Same pattern, he said to Denny. Same MO. But why Grey Harbor? Why now? Denny shook his head. Are you saying the same person is responsible? Julian didn't answer. The thought alone made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The fog hides secrets. By nightfall, Julian returned to the lighthouse with a small team. The fog had thickened to the point where visibility was barely 10 feet. Every sound was amplified, the distant crash of waves, the rustle of weeds along the cliff path, a faint creaking of old timber. Julian scanned the rocks with a flashlight. Then he noticed the faintest sign, a ribbon caught on a jagged stone. Pink. Threadbare. Emily's school colors. Hey, Julian whispered. They moved carefully toward it. The fog seemed to grow heavier with every step, pressing against them. Then came the sound again, soft footsteps, echoing on the gravel behind the lighthouse. Julian spun. No one. Then a whisper. Clear, distinct. Julian Cross. The hair on his arms stood up. The team tensed. But before he could respond, the flashlight caught something glinting on the edge of the cliff, a small silver locket, swinging gently as if held by invisible hands. He recognized it immediately. Emily's locket. The hidden chamber. Examining the lighthouse closer, Julian found something that hadn't been noted in any town record. A small trapdoor, partially concealed by moss and fog. It led down into a cramped space beneath the lighthouse, bare, damp, smelling of salt and decay. Nothing inside. No Emily. Just scratches on the walls. Signs of struggle. And footprints, fading into the stone floor. Not a child's. Adult. Male. Julian's gut twisted. Whoever had taken Emily had prepared for this. The lighthouse was a trap, and he, or she, had known every detail. A message in the fog. As Julian emerged from the basement, the fog pressed close again. The silver locket lay in his hand. He held it to the dim light, opening it. Inside, nothing. No photograph, no note. Then the whisper came again, floating through the mist. You're looking, but you don't see. Julian froze. This was more than a kidnapping. This was a game. And the rules were unknown. Somewhere in the fog, Emily Hartley was alive. Somewhere, someone was watching. Somewhere, the first of Grey Harbor's whispers would reveal itself. And Julian knew, if he didn't follow the trail carefully, the fog would swallow another child, and no one would ever hear the whispers again. The next morning, Grey Harbor woke to a thick, impenetrable fog that rolled in from the ocean like a living tide. The entire town seemed suspended between dream and reality. Street lamps glowed like faint beacons, the water lapped silently against the docks, and the wooden planks creaked under the weight of invisible footsteps. Detective Julian Cross parked his car near the harbor's edge and stepped out, his coat damp from the moisture clinging to the air. The dog, Emily's companion, was curled in the passenger seat, quiet but alert. Julian had given it a name, Shadow. He thought it fitting. The dog was more than a pet now. It was a witness. The first discovery. Julian moved cautiously along the main dock, scanning the fog for any movement. It was here that he first noticed the shadows. Not literal shadows, but shapes, elongated, distorted by the mist, moving between the piles of nets and stacked crates. They disappeared when he focused on them, reappeared when he looked away. The fog played tricks, yes, but instinct told him someone, or something, was hiding there. Shadow, Julian whispered, kneeling to release the leash. The dog hesitated, sniffing the air, ears pricked forward. Then it darted toward the shadows with surprising speed, low growl rumbling from its chest. Julian followed, heart pounding. The fog muffled sound, distorted light, and twisted perception. Every plank he stepped on seemed to groan in warning. Near the far end of the docks, under a broken warehouse roof, the dog stopped. Julian crouched beside it. The faintest glimmer caught his eye, a footprint pressed into the soft mud beside the piling posts. Adult. Male. Size 9. Wet soil and traces of salt. Julian traced the prints toward a narrow alleyway between warehouses. They stopped abruptly. No footprints beyond that. It was as if whoever had walked there had simply vanished into the fog. The fisherman's tale. Julian approached a small group of fishermen repairing nets. Their faces were lined, weathered by years at sea. "You see anything unusual last night?" he asked. One man, older than the rest, spit into the water. "Aye. Fog came in thick. Saw a man moving near the lighthouse. Didn't look like he belonged." "Tall?" Julian prompted. The fisherman nodded. "Tall. Black coat. Pale face. Moved like he was gliding over the fog. Didn't seem human, if you ask me." Julian frowned. "Did anyone follow him?" The man shook his head. "No. He knows the docks like his own dem. He's careful." Another fisherman, younger, muttered, "There's stories, sir. About the fog. About people who disappear. About lights moving in the mist." Julian's jaw tightened. He had heard the rumors before, dismissed by outsiders. Now, standing here, it all felt dangerously plausible. The warehouse. Following the footprints, Julian entered the warehouse at the end of the docks. Broken windows let in shards of gray light. Nets hung from the ceiling, crates stacked like tombstones. The air smelled of salt, mildew, and something else, something metallic. Shadow padded silently ahead, nose twitching, ears forward. The dog stopped suddenly at a crate, whining softly. Julian crouched. Something was etched into the wood, scratches deep, deliberate. Letters? Symbols? He traced the marks. At first, they seemed random. Then, in the dim light, he realized, initials. E.H. Emily Hartley. Julian's pulse quickened. The dog backed once, low and urgent. From the other side of the warehouse, a faint movement. A shadow against the fogged window. "Emily." Julian called. No response. Just the sound of planks creaking under weight he could not see. He advanced carefully. The shadow shifted, then vanished. Not out a door, vanished entirely. The dockside trap. Julian's mind raced. The man in the black coat, the fog, the footprints that ended abruptly. This was no ordinary kidnapping. This was planned, calculated, and it was a trap. Returning to the docks, Julian noticed something he hadn't before. Small lines of twine stretched between posts, almost invisible in the fog. They were set at varying heights. Tripwires. He froze, realizing the implication. Whoever had taken Emily had prepared this space to channel movement. To guide him, or anyone else, into confusion. Careful now, he navigated the dock, noting each wire. Some bent when brushed, others tight, ready to trip. The fog twisted perception further, making distances seem greater, shadows stretch, and every sound echo unnaturally. And then he heard it, a soft voice, almost imperceptible over the water's slap against the pilings. Julian Cross. The hairs on his neck stood up. It wasn't a whisper carried by the wind. It was deliberate. Close. The first trap. A sudden snap echoed from the dock behind him. He spun, flashlight sweeping the fog. Nothing. Then the ground beneath him shifted. A plank, rotten with age, gave way. Julian stumbled but caught himself, heart racing. "Shadow," he barked. The dog growled low. The locket. Emily's silver locket, dangling from a nail in a post, glimmered faintly. Julian grabbed it, heart in his throat. Whoever had set this up wanted him here. They wanted him to see. But what? The old lighthouse keeper. Julian decided to speak with someone who might know more about the fog and the docks. Old Jonas Reed, former lighthouse keeper, had retired decades ago but still walked the pier, keeping an eye on the harbor. Jonas lived in a small cabin near the edge, smoke curling from a crooked chimney. He answered the door, stooped and pale, as though the fog had taken part of him with it. "You're looking for Emily Hartley," he said before Julian could speak. "I am," Julian replied cautiously. "You know something?" Jonas nodded, ushering him inside. "I've seen this before. Girls vanish near lighthouses, near the water, and the fog swallows them. But it's not the fog, detective. It's the person who moves in it." "Who?" Julian asked. Jonas leaned in, voice low. Tall, black coat, pale. Moves like a shadow. Eyes like the mist itself. Been at it for decades. Always the same pattern. Lighthouses, docks, cliffs. Always watching. Always waiting. Julian's mind reeled. A serial predator, orchestrating disappearances over decades. Always hidden by the fog. Always leaving only whispers. Has anyone tried to stop him? Julian asked. Jonas shook his head. He's clever. Always a step ahead. Some say he's part of the town. Some say he isn't even human. Julian left Jonah's cabin with more questions than answers. One certainty, Emily was alive, but trapped in a plan that spanned years, maybe decades. The hidden ledger. Returning to the station, Julian reviewed old case files. Tessa Morgan, Emily Hartley, other missing children near the coast over the past 30 years. Patterns emerged, fog, lighthouses, docks, similar footprints. And then he found something strange. In Tessa Morgan's file, a small handwritten ledger, overlooked during the original investigation. Names, dates, locations, docks, cliffs, abandoned warehouses, and initials. BH. BH. The same as the man Jonas described? Julian's pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. The disappearances formed a web, a deliberate network, spanning decades, with lighthouses and docks at its center. The first clue to Emily's whereabouts. That night, Julian returned to the lighthouse, walking carefully along the docks. The fog pressed close, and every sound was amplified. Shadow padded silently beside him. Near the water's edge, Julian noticed a small opening, partially hidden behind a stack of crates. Fresh footprints led toward it. He crouched, examining them. Child-sized. Emily. And beside them, deeper in the mud, larger prints. Adult. 9 or 10 in size. The fog thickened. Julian felt the same whisper again. You're looking, but you don't see. He shined his flashlight into the darkness. The beam caught movement, a black coat disappearing into a small tunnel beneath the warehouse. Julian swallowed hard. The game had begun. The fog had swallowed Emily Hartley, but it had also swallowed her captor. And Julian Cross would have to follow, step by step, through the shadows of Grey Harbor, if he hoped to find her alive. The fog was heavier than ever. By the time Julian Cross returned to the docks the next night, it was nearly impossible to see the water, the horizon, or the wooden planks beneath his boots. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified by the dense mist. Shadow padded close to his side, ears forward, tail low but stiff, alert to unseen threats. Julian tightened his coat, trying to ignore the chill crawling up his spine. He had spent the day reviewing old records, the ledger from Tessa Morgan's file, witness accounts from past disappearances, and photographs of abandoned lighthouses along the coast. Patterns emerged. Lighthouses, docks, fog. Child disappearances, footprints, shadows. The same black-coated man. For decades, he had been using the fog as camouflage, taking children, and leaving only whispers behind. Julian's gut told him Emily was close. The hidden tunnel. Near the base of the old warehouse at the far end of the docks, Julian located the opening again. Crates, nets, and broken planks partially concealed it. The child-sized footprints led straight to it, and the larger adult prints stopped abruptly beside the entrance. Whoever had entered had wanted to be followed, or maybe had known someone would. Julian crouched, flashlight cutting a narrow beam into the blackness. He peered inside. The tunnel descended sharply, stone walls slick with moisture, salt seeping from every crevice. The smell hit him first, damp earth, brine, and faintly, something sweet. Old smoke. Chemicals? He couldn't tell. Shadow sniffed at the opening, then carefully padded inside. Julian followed, careful not to make noise. Every step echoed unnaturally, bouncing off the walls, fog from above descending like mist from a waterfall. The tunnel was narrow, just wide enough for a single person. Julian felt the stone walls pressing in, claustrophobic, and wondered how the captor had managed to maneuver in the dark. Symbols in the stone. A few feet down the tunnel, Julian noticed scratches along the walls. At first, they seemed random, marks from tools or erosion, but as he examined them, the pattern became clear. Symbols. Repeated carvings. A child's initials. And then more, numbers. Dates spanning decades. He paused, trying to process. These tunnels were not just a hiding place. They were a record. Every disappearance, every child taken, meticulously marked in stone. Emily wasn't the first. She was the latest in a string that stretched back years. Shadow whined softly, pawing at a section of the wall. Julian crouched and shone his light there. Faint, smeared letters in what looked like ash or chalk spelled a single word. Watch. A chill ran down Julian's spine. The captain knew someone was coming, or wanted someone to come. The first encounter. Deeper into the tunnel, Julian reached a fork. Left led toward a faint glimmer of light, right descended into darkness. He hesitated. Shadow sniffed both directions, then back toward the right. Julian followed, flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. Then he heard it, a faint voice, barely audible. Stop, or you'll never see her again. Julian froze. The voice was soft, childlike, but laced with authority. Almost commanding. Emily, he called, stepping carefully. Silence. Then footsteps, faster this time, moving toward the left tunnel. The fog seemed to shift around him, curling like a living thing, disorienting. Julian followed the sound, turning sharply at the fork. And then he saw a shadow. A tall figure, backlit by a faint light at the end of the tunnel. Black coat, broad shoulders. Pale face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The figure stopped, then turned slowly. Julian's breath caught. He recognized the posture, the deliberate, calm way the man held himself. This was the predator, the one who had haunted Grey Harbor for decades. The predator's lair. The tunnel opened into a cavern beneath the docks. Crates and barrels were stacked high, forming makeshift walls and corridors. Candles flickered in sconces attached to the walls, casting shadows that danced on stone. The air was damp, heavy with brine, and faintly sweet. In the center of the cavern was Emily. She was unharmed but terrified, sitting on a wooden crate, knees drawn to her chest. Her eyes widened when she saw Julian. Shadow ran to her side, tail wagging uncertainly. The man in the black coat stepped forward, his voice calm but chilling. You've come far, Detective Cross. Julian raised his flashlight. Step away from her. The man smiled faintly. She's safe. For now. Julian didn't lower the flashlight. You can't keep doing this. Decades of disappearances. Children. Lives ruined. The man's eyes glimmered in the candlelight. I observe. I catalogue. I maintain order in chaos. Julian's jaw tightened. You're delusional. This is kidnapping, plain and simple. The man shrugged. Perspective is everything. A test of wits. Julian scanned the cavern. Crates formed a maze. Shadows flickered unnaturally. He noticed subtle marks on the floor, lines drawn in chalk. A path, leading from Emily's crate to a small ladder ascending through a hidden hatch. The man noticed Julian's gaze. You may take her, if you can navigate the path correctly. One misstep and it ends. Julian swallowed. The trap was clear. The labyrinth beneath the docks was rigged. One wrong move, and the fog, or traps within, would claim him. He glanced at Shadow, who growled low. The dog nudged Julian toward the first chalk mark. Julian followed. Step by careful step, he advanced, eyes scanning for wires, pitfalls, anything. Candles flickered, casting shadows that seemed alive, moving independently of the flames. Every turn felt like a test. The fog in the cavern. Halfway through, a sudden breeze swept through the cavern. Candles flickered violently, shadows dancing wildly. Julian nearly tripped over a loose plank. The man's voice echoed softly. Observe the fog. It will guide you. Ignore it, and you are lost. Julian paused, realizing the fog was a sensory trick, a combination of smoke and mirrors, candles, and carefully placed misting devices. The captor had prepared this labyrinth meticulously. Every step, every shadow, every echo was a calculated disorientation tactic. Shadow backed. Julian followed the dog's lead, stepping carefully along the faint chalk lines. Narrow escape. Finally, Julian reached the ladder. Emily scrambled up, Shadow bounding behind her. Just as they reached the hatch, a net dropped from the ceiling, snapping just below Julian's chest. He lunged forward, grabbed Emily's hand, and pulled her through. The predator's voice echoed faintly from below. You've passed the test, for now. Julian hauled Emily up, breathing heavily. She was trembling but unharmed. Shadow licked her hands, tail wagging. Once outside, the fog had begun to lift slightly. Julian turned toward the harbor, flashlight scanning for the man. But the cabin was empty. No sign of the predator. Only silence. Aftermath. Emily clung to Julian as he led her to the car. He was waiting for me, she whispered. I know, Julian said. But you're safe now. At the station, Emily was reunited with her parents. Tears, hugs, and quiet sobs filled the room. Julian finally allowed himself to breathe, but he knew this was only the beginning. The predator was still out there. He had been at it for decades, and the ledger, the symbols, the fog, all of it hinted at more victims, more disappearances, and a man who seemed impossible to catch. Julian studied Emily carefully. She had been brave, observant, and alert. Something about her eyes told him she had seen more than she was letting on. And Julian had a sinking feeling. The labyrinth beneath the docks, the shadowy figure, and the fog were only the opening moves of a much larger game. A whispered warning. As Julian left the station that night, walking back toward his car, the fog rolled in again. A soft voice floated on the wind, nearly indistinguishable from the natural hush of the harbor. You've rescued her, but the game has only begun. Julian shivered. Grey Harbor had secrets buried deep, beneath the docks, behind lighthouses, and hidden in the fog. And somewhere, the predator was already planning his next move. Julian knew he couldn't rest. Not until every shadow was exposed, every whisper understood, and the children of Grey Harbor were truly safe. The morning after Emily's rescue, Grey Harbor was eerily quiet. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing the harbor's worn docks and peeling paint of the abandoned warehouses. The town seemed almost innocent again, but Julian Cross knew better. The predator who had taken Emily was still out there, and the rescue had been just a temporary reprieve. At the police station, Julian sat at his desk, surrounded by files and photographs. He opened the ledger found in Tessa Morgan's cold case file again. Names, dates, locations, all tied to coastal towns across decades. He traced a finger down the entries, pausing at familiar places. Grey Harbor, Ravens Point, Wind Cliff, towns with lighthouses, isolated piers, and disappearances that had never been solved. Every entry followed the same chilling pattern: child, fog, lighthouse, and the man in the black coat. A knock at the door pulled him from the ledger. It was Officer Denny. You're still going through this stuff? You've barely slept. Julian didn't look up. I need to understand him. If I know his past, maybe I can predict his next move. Denny frowned. You really think there's a pattern? I mean, decades of disappearances. Julian finally met his gaze. I know there's a pattern. I just need to map it. Revisiting Tessa Morgan. Julian began with Tessa Morgan, the girl who had vanished 15 years ago. Unlike Emily, she had never been found. Her case was cold, files gathering dust in the archives. Julian pulled every report, every statement, every photograph. Tessa was 12, like Emily, with auburn hair and a sharp mind. Witnesses had reported seeing a tall man in a black coat near the cliffs by the old lighthouse on the night she disappeared. Some claimed to hear whispers in the fog. Julian compared the ledger with Tessa's file. Names, dates, locations, all matched the entries in the ledger almost exactly. He realized that Emily wasn't the first child to be lured into the fog. She was simply the latest. A thought struck him cold. What if he's been doing this all along and no one realized? What if every disappearance, every whispered warning in the fog, has been part of a single, decades-long plan? The lighthouse keeper's secret. Julian visited Jonas Reed, the retired lighthouse keeper, again. He needed more than stories. He needed specifics. Jonas welcomed him into the small cabin. The smell of sea salt and wood smoke thick in the air. Detective, Jonas began, I've seen him. That man. I've seen him for years. He always watches, always waits. Lighthouses, piers, it's like he knows the fog better than anyone. Do you know his name? Julian asked. Jonas shook his head. No. Some say he's not human. Others, some say he was a keeper once, like me. But older. Much older. He knows the sea, the fog, the rocks. He knows how to disappear and reappear like smoke. Julian frowned. Older. Jonas nodded. The first disappearance I remember was nearly 40 years ago. A girl. Same method. Fog. Lighthouses. The town barely noticed because it was assumed she ran away. But he was there. Julian's pulse quickened. 40 years. Jonah's grimaced. I've watched him take children across decades. The ledger you found, that's his history. Every child recorded. Every movement documented. Julian leaned back, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. He realized the predator was not only meticulous but patient beyond measure. He had waited decades for the right opportunities. The investigative breakthrough. Back at the station, Julian began mapping the entries in the ledger against actual missing children reports. A pattern emerged. Every disappearance coincided with thick fog near a lighthouse. Some were reported immediately, others not until weeks later. And then he noticed something more subtle. All the towns had small shipping industries, docks that fell into disrepair, or warehouses abandoned for decades. Places where a predator could move undetected. Julian leaned back, rubbing his temples. He doesn't just choose children. He chooses the perfect environment, places the fog can protect him, places where no one will notice until it's too late. Officer Denny peered over his shoulder. So what now? Julian's eyes were hard. We track every lighthouse, every dock, every abandoned warehouse along the coast. Is predictable, and if we understand his rules, maybe we can anticipate his next move. A clue in the ledger. As Julian studied the ledger further, he noticed a peculiar set of markings. Some entries were underlined. Others had tiny symbols beside the names, dots, lines, strange etchings that resembled the scratches he had seen in the tunnels beneath the docks. He pulled out a magnifying glass and studied them carefully. The symbols appeared to indicate the method of each child's captivity. Some were simple, short-term holding in hidden rooms. Others suggested long-term manipulation, psychological control, even grooming for obedience. Julian realized the predator was not only meticulous in capturing children but also in controlling them, shaping their behavior to ensure compliance. Shadow whined beside him, and Julian looked up. He realized the dog had been watching him intently, as if sensing the gravity of the revelation. A survivor's story. Julian knew he needed more than patterns and maps. He needed someone who had experienced the predator's tactics firsthand. He began searching for surviving victims. One name kept appearing, Hannah Briggs. She had vanished briefly as a child, only to be returned weeks later under mysterious circumstances. Hannah lived in Ravens Point now, a small town 50 miles north. Julian drove through the misty morning, following the coastline, arriving at her modest home by late afternoon. She opened the door cautiously, eyes wary, hands shaking slightly. "I know who you are," she said. "You're trying to stop him." Julian nodded. "I need your help. I need to understand him, how he chooses his victims, how he operates. Anything you can tell me might save Emily or another child." Hannah let him in. She had a calm demeanor, but her eyes betrayed years of fear and trauma. "He's methodical," she said softly. "He studies families, children. The fog is his ally. He knows how to manipulate perception, how to isolate you so you feel trapped, alone. But he doesn't just take children. He watches them, sometimes for weeks, sometimes months, before he acts." Julian took notes, heart pounding. Every detail she provided fit perfectly with what he had observed in Gray Harbor. A web across time. Hannah continued. "I remember one thing clearly. He has rules. He doesn't just act randomly. He records everything. Ledger. Symbols. He's obsessed with documentation. And if someone interferes, he waits. Watches. Makes you feel powerless. That's how he wins." Julian's mind raced. The tunnels beneath the warehouse, the chalk lines, the test he had passed with Emily. Everything was part of the predator's twisted game. He had created a system to manipulate, terrorize, and control, all while remaining hidden in the fog. "What about others?" Julian asked. "Do you know if anyone else survived?" Hannah shook her head. "Most don't. That's why he's been so successful for decades. People see the fog, hear the whispers, and assume it's a local legend. No one realizes the man in the black coat is real and dangerous." Julian clenched his fists. He realized that Emily's rescue had been a miracle, but it was only the beginning. The predator had been waiting for decades, refining his tactics, and now that someone had interfered, he would adapt. A town in fear. Returning to Gray Harbor, Julian saw the subtle changes in the town. Parents kept children indoors. Shopkeepers closed early. Even the harbor itself seemed to shrink under the fog's oppressive presence. Everyone was uneasy, sensing a predator they could not see. Julian walked along the edge of the docks, Shadow at his side, replaying Hannah's words in his mind. The man in the black coat wasn't just a kidnapper, he was a strategist. He anticipated moves, controlled perception, and thrived in the fog. Julian realized one terrifying truth. Grey Harbor was not the first town to fall under his control, and it would not be the last. The predator's web stretched across decades, and he had only begun to unravel it. The predator's next move. As night fell, Julian reviewed the ledger again, tracing symbols and patterns. One entry caught his attention, recent, barely legible. A date only a week from now, tied to a small coastal village not far from Grey Harbor. Julian's jaw tightened. The predator had a plan, and he was following it. The disappearances were not random, they were scheduled, deliberate, each step part of a decades-long strategy. Shadow backed, snapping Julian from his thoughts. Outside, the fog rolled in thick again, swallowing the docks, the harbor, and the town's lights. Julian felt the weight of decades pressing down. Somewhere in the mist, the predator waited, watching, planning. And Julian knew he had no time. The game was far from over. The echoes of the past were alive, guiding the predator's next move. And if Julian didn't act, another child could vanish, just like Tessa Morgan, just like countless others before Emily Hartley. The fog whispered again, carrying a single, chilling message. The next one will not escape. Julian cross-tightened his coat and stepped into the mist. The hunt had only begun. The fog had returned thicker than ever, curling along the edges of Grey Harbor like ghostly fingers. Julian Cross stood at the old lighthouse, staring up at the peeling white walls and the rusted iron railing of the observation deck. After his meeting with Hannah Briggs, he knew he needed more than witness accounts and patterns. He needed history. He needed to understand the predator, and for that, he needed the lighthouse itself. Jonas Reed, the retired lighthouse keeper, had hinted at something, an old diary hidden somewhere in the lighthouse's basement when he had first taken the post decades ago. Julian hoped it might provide answers. Unearthing the diary. Inside the lighthouse, Julian found the basement hatch hidden beneath rotting floorboards. With Shadow at his side, he crawled into the damp space. The air smelled of mildew and salt, but beneath that was another scent, old paper, dust, and something metallic. Amid crates of preserved supplies and forgotten maritime tools, he spotted a small, rusted chest. The lock was brittle and easily pried open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from damp, was a leather-bound diary. The pages were yellowed, fragile, and filled with neat handwriting in ink faded to brown. Julian opened it carefully. The first pages were mundane, records of lighthouse maintenance, weather logs, and ship sightings. But as he turned further, he found something darker, entries that did not belong to a normal lighthouse keeper. The keeper's obsession. The diary belonged to a man named Bartholomew Halloway, a name Julian had noted from the ledger's initials, B.H. Bartholomew's entries began like any keeper's log, dates, weather, ship traffic, but soon shifted to meticulous notes about children in nearby towns. April 12, 1978, observed girl walking alone near the cliff. 12 years old. Curious, cautious. Notebook started for cataloging. Methodical observation recommended. Julian's breath caught. This was not a sporadic series of crimes. This was deliberate, systematic. Another entry. October 4th, 1983. Child vanished from Ravens Point. Observed for 2 weeks prior. Fear management applied. Compliance achieved. Ledger updated. Every entry mirrored the ledger he had found in Tessa Morgan's case. Every child recorded. Every date precise. Every observation methodical. Julian felt a chill. This was a predator who had studied human behavior with the precision of a scientist, treating children as subjects in a long-running experiment. Patterns of the past. As he read further, Julian began to see patterns emerge in Bartholomew Halloway's methods. He chose towns with lighthouses or fog-heavy coastal regions. He targeted children between 12 and 14. He used the environment, the fog, cliffs, docks, as camouflage. He prepared labyrinthine traps beneath abandoned warehouses. He meticulously documented each victim and their behavior. The diary also included references to symbols, codes, and tests, chalk lines in basements, tripwires along docks, and hidden tunnels designed to disorient pursuers. Every tactic Julian had seen in Grey Harbor, every trap beneath the warehouse, was written in the diary decades earlier. Julian realized the predator wasn't just a criminal. He was a planner, a historian of his own crimes, and, terrifyingly, decades ahead of anyone who might try to stop him. The psychological game. Bartholomew's diary revealed another disturbing aspect. He studied not just the children, but their families. Notes about habits, fears, routines, and psychological traits filled page after page. Emily Hartley, curious, brave, observant. Likely to resist direct intimidation. Strategy, use fog and isolation. Create a maze to test obedience. Observe compliance without direct contact. Record all findings. Julian's heart raced. It was as if the diary had been written yesterday. Bartholomew had already studied Emily before the kidnapping. The meticulous planning, the trap beneath the docks, the fog, everything was premeditated, documented, and executed with precision. The predator had been preparing decades for children like Emily. A disturbing revelation. One entry made Julian's stomach turn. March 12, 1991, ledger updated. Revisions necessary. Compliance improving. Notes, must avoid detection. Will relocate if attention drawn. Fog remains most effective ally. Continue long-term observation of coastal towns. Bartholomew Halloway had been active for decades, and his crimes spanned generations. He adapted, learned, and evolved his methods as the years passed. His obsession was relentless. He was patient, methodical, and terrifyingly clever. Julian closed the diary, hands trembling slightly. This man had not only terrorized generations but had remained invisible, protected by towns that dismissed the fog as legend, dismissing whispers as superstition. Cross-referencing the ledger. Back at the station, Julian began cross-referencing the diary with the ledger and old case files. Dates, locations, and methods lined up almost perfectly. Each victim was accounted for, each disappearance anticipated by Bartholomew in his diary. But one detail caught Julian off guard. An entry in 1976 referenced a child named Tessa Morgan, the same girl who had vanished 15 years ago in Ravens Point. Bartholomew had observed her meticulously, planning her abduction years in advance. Julian realized the chilling truth. Bartholomew didn't act impulsively. He planned, waited, studied, and executed with decades of foresight. And now, Emily Hartley had become part of that same timeline. Shadow's warning. Shadow growled softly, snapping Julian from his thoughts. The dog padded toward the doorway, ears twitching, tail stiff. Julian followed its gaze, toward the harbor, now shrouded again in fog, thicker than before. A faint whisper floated on the wind, indistinct but unmistakable. "Do you see, detective?" Julian's blood ran cold. He knew the predator was watching, even now. Every diary entry, every ledger note, every disappearance was a calculated message. The predator was not just hiding in the fog. He was guiding, manipulating, and observing. He glanced back at Emily's photograph on his desk. She had survived the initial abduction, but Julian knew the predator's attention might return. He couldn't rely on chance or luck. He needed strategy, preparation, and understanding of Bartholomew's mind. Planning the next move. Julian reviewed the diary and ledger side by side. There were towns Bartholomew had observed for years but never struck. There were patterns he had followed meticulously, with breaks spanning months or even years. The gaps were deliberate, creating a false sense of security for the towns. Julian realized something crucial. The predator would act again. Soon. He had been interrupted in Grey Harbor, but the next target was already in his plans. Every diary entry, every symbol, every mark of chalk was a breadcrumb leading to the next abduction. Julian made a decision. He would not wait for the next disappearance. He would confront the predator on his own terms. He would study the diary, map the ledger, anticipate the patterns, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Shadow lay at his feet, head resting on Julian's boot. The dog's quiet presence was grounding. Julian rubbed its ears, thinking about Emily and every child Bartholomew had ever taken. He knew one thing: this battle would not be won by luck. It would be won by knowledge, patience, and the ability to think like the predator. A warning from the past. As Julian left the lighthouse that night, the fog had thickened to the point of near invisibility. The harbor was silent, the docks empty, the air still and heavy. A single voice echoed through the mist, barely audible. You study the past, detective, but the future waits for no one. Julian's jaw tightened. He realized the predator was already steps ahead, anticipating him. The diary had revealed Bartholomew's mind, his methods, and his history, but the man himself remained unseen, untouchable, and always in control. Julian crossed the harbor, shadow at his side, and knew the next move had to be precise. The predator had decades of experience, a labyrinth beneath the docks, and a fog-shrouded town to hide in. But now, Julian had insight. He had knowledge. He had preparation, and he would use it to end the predator's reign. The fog whispered around him as he walked, carrying a single, chilling promise. You think you understand, but you have only just begun. The fog had settled over Grey Harbor like a shroud, thicker and more suffocating than ever. Street lamps glowed dimly through the haze, casting halos of light that did little to penetrate the oppressive mist. The harbor was silent, yet Julian Cross felt the weight of unseen eyes on him. Shadow padded closely, ears twitching at every small sound, the creak of a dock, the drip of water from rusted chains, the whisper of fog against the weathered walls of the warehouses. Julian had spent the day studying Bartholomew Halloway's diary and ledger. Every note, every symbol, every observation of his decades-long reign of terror was meticulously recorded. Yet the more Julian knew, the more he realized how little he truly understood. Bartholomew was always calculating, always patient, and now, after Emily's rescue, he had been provoked. Somewhere in the fog, the predator was already planning his return. A break in the pattern. Julian returned to the police station, laying out the ledger and diary side by side. Each town, each disappearance, each pattern. The predator had never failed to plan meticulously. But now, after decades of calculated actions, the pattern might shift. He needed to anticipate the changes. Denny, Julian said, pointing at the ledger. Look here. The dates, every disappearance corresponds with the densest fog, near lighthouses, docks, or abandoned warehouses. But see this gap? The last 3 disappearances were months apart. Is testing something? Denny frowned. Testing what? Julian's eyes narrowed. The law, the town, the authorities. And now us. He knows someone's interfering. He knows I'm watching. And is going to act again, soon. The first threat. That evening, a call came in from a fisherman patrolling the far docks. His voice trembled over the radio. Detective Cross. I saw something. A man. Tall. Black coat. Pale face. Moving, like he knew I was watching. But he wasn't human. Julian's pulse quickened. He grabbed his coat and flashlight, Shadow at his side. Where exactly? He demanded. Near the northern pier, past the old warehouse. I didn't stay to watch, I swear. Julian didn't wait. He raced toward the pier, navigating the fog-soaked docks. Every step was cautious, every sound amplified. Shadow's low growl echoed as they approached the northern edge. And there he was, a tall figure in a black coat, partially hidden behind crates. Hat pulled low, face pale and expressionless. The predator had returned. The chase begins. Julian flicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the fog. The man didn't run. He moved deliberately, stepping into the shadows, always just beyond reach. Julian followed, careful, listening. Every creak of the planks, every shift of the fog seemed to guide the predator's path. Shadow darted forward, growling. The man paused, watching. A faint smile played across his lips. Then he vanished, slipping through a side tunnel Julian hadn't noticed before, one that descended beneath the pier. Julian cursed under his breath. He had anticipated the fog, the shadows, but the tunnels were another matter entirely. Whoever had built them had decades of experience. He couldn't afford a misstep. Beneath the docks. The tunnel beneath the pier was familiar in design but more elaborate than the one beneath the warehouse. Multiple branches, some blocked with debris, others leading to hidden alcoves. Julian's flashlight illuminated the damp walls, water dripping steadily. The smell was stronger here, salt, decay, and faintly, the metallic tang of blood. Shadow padded ahead, nose to the ground, ears forward. Julian followed carefully, memoizing the twists and turns. He realized the predator had prepared this labyrinth for observation and misdirection. Every turn was a test, every dead end a trap. And then he heard it, the whispering voice, carried through the misty tunnels. You follow, but you do not see. Julian froze. The words were deliberate, taunting, almost ceremonial. Bartholomew Halloway was playing a game, and Julian had entered the arena. The first encounter. Rounding a corner, Julian saw movement. The predator emerged from the shadows, tall and pale, black coat brushing the floor. He held something in his hand, Emily's locket, silver and glinting in the dim light. Julian's jaw tightened. Step away. The man smiled faintly. Detective Cross, persistent, aren't we? I admire it. Most would have fled by now. Give her back, Julian said, trying to keep his voice steady. She is safe, the predator replied, voice calm. For now. But you are in my labyrinth. Every step you take, every move you make, I watch. The fog, the tunnels, the shadows, they are my allies. Do you understand? Julian's grip tightened on his flashlight. He had read Bartholomew's diary, studied his methods, but standing here, face to face with the man, he realized the depth of his cunning. The predator was not just clever, he was terrifyingly intelligent, patient, and ruthless. A psychological battle. The predator began to move slowly along the tunnel, each step measured. Julian followed, careful to maintain distance. Shadow growled low, sensing the danger, but Julian knew the dog would not attack without provocation. The predator was watching them, guiding their path, shaping the environment to disorient and control. You think you understand me, the predator said, voice echoing through the stone corridor. But this is not about you. It is about the pattern, the design, the observation. The fog does not lie. Shadows reveal. And those who enter my world must play by my rules. Julian felt the pressure of the words. The tunnels were a test, a puzzle, and a threat all at once. One wrong move could trap him, or worse. He recalled Hannah Briggs' warning. The predator studied, manipulated, and observed. He thrived in fear and confusion, bending perception until reality itself was uncertain. Julian had to rely on logic, memory, and instinct. Every detail in the diary, every symbol in the ledger, every prior observation was now critical. The labyrinth's trap. Suddenly, a trap activated. A section of the floor shifted, dropping slightly, releasing a thin net that shot toward Julian's legs. He leapt back, shadow barking fiercely. The predator's voice echoed. You must move carefully, every misstep matters. Julian realized the labyrinth was alive with hazards, tripwires, nets, pitfalls, and misdirection. Bartholomew Halloway had turned the fog, the tunnels, and the shadows into a weapon. Every element was designed to confuse and intimidate, to test courage, logic, and observation. Shadow nudged Julian forward, nose to the ground, guiding him along a safe path. Step by careful step, they advanced deeper into the tunnels. A glimpse of Emily. Through a narrow passage, Julian caught sight of Emily, seated on a crate, trembling but unharmed. She clutched her locket, eyes wide with fear and determination. Seeing her gave Julian focus. He could not fail. The predator stood at the far end of the chamber, watching silently. Observe, detective. The maze is mine. The fog is mine. The rules are mine. But you have spirit. That may be enough, for now. Julian clenched his fists. He would play by the rules only as long as he needed to. Then he would take control. The narrow escape. Julian devised a plan on the spot. Using the symbols in the diary and ledger as a guide, he navigated the traps and led Emily through the twists and turns. Shadow stayed close, alert, guiding them around pitfalls and tripwires. At last, they reached a hidden hatch leading to the surface. Julian pulled Emily and Shadow up, heart pounding. The fog outside was thick, but the harbor lights offered guidance. The predator's voice echoed faintly from the tunnels below. Clever, but temporary. You have only delayed the inevitable. Julian ignored it. He held Emily's hand tightly as they reached the street, guiding her to safety. Aftermath. Emily was reunited with her parents once more, but Julian knew the danger was far from over. Bartholomew Halloway had retreated for now, but he would return, and his next move would be calculated, deliberate, and deadly. Julian studied the fog as it rolled over the harbor, knowing that somewhere in its depths, the predator was watching, planning, and waiting. Grey Harbor would never be truly safe until Bartholomew Halloway was stopped, permanently. As night fell, the fog whispered once again, carrying a single chilling message. You may have won this round, Detective Cross, but the game continues. Julian tightened his coat, shadow at his side, and stared into the mist. The predator had returned, and now, the hunt was personal. Grey Harbor had never felt smaller. The fog lay over the town like a living shroud, thick and unyielding, curling around docks, houses, and the narrow streets. Every shadow seemed alive, and every creak of wood sounded like footsteps following Julian Cross. He walked slowly, shadow at his side, the leather-bound diary and ledger tucked under his arm. The predator had returned. Julian knew it. And now, he had a new lead, a mysterious message left at the station, a single envelope, unmarked except for a faint symbol he recognized from Bartholomew Halloway's diary. Inside, a note, written in elegant, deliberate script. Detective Cross, you cannot stop what has been planned for decades. But there is one who may guide you. Seek the widow at the edge of the cliffs. She has seen what you cannot. OB.H. The widow's house. The widow's house stood at the northern cliffs, a decaying mansion overlooking the roaring sea below. Its windows were dark, curtains fluttering in the wind, and the entire structure seemed ready to collapse into the waves. Julian approached cautiously, shadow growling softly. Inside, the house was silent. Dust covered every surface, cobwebs draping corners like tattered veils. Julian called out, "Hello, Mrs.?" A voice answered from the shadows. "I've been expecting you." From the darkness emerged a woman, slender, gray-haired, with eyes sharp and calculating. She wore black, a widow's garb, and her presence filled the room with a quiet authority. "Detective Cross," she said, voice calm but firm. "You're meddling in matters older than you realize. And dangerous." Julian studied her. There was something about her, experience, fear, and knowledge blended together. "You know about Bartholomew Halloway," he said. The widow nodded. "I do, and I know why he has returned to Grey Harbor. I've lived through his games before. The fog, the tunnels, the children. He's patient, meticulous, and cruel. But there are ways to anticipate him, if you know the history. A legacy of horror." The widow introduced herself as Margaret Linton, once married to the lighthouse keeper of Ravens Point. Her husband had died under mysterious circumstances decades ago, shortly after reporting strange activity in the fog. "I saw him, detective," Margaret said, voice trembling slightly. "Bartholomew Halloway. A man who studied the fog as if it were alive, who watched the children, who catalogued their every movement. He took Emily Hartley, just as he took others before her. He returns every decade, seeking control, observation, and satisfaction." Julian's pulse quickened. "How do you know he's returning now?" Margaret pointed toward the window, where the fog clung to the cliffs. "The patterns are the same. The disappearances, the timing, the fog. He moves according to the lunar cycles, tides, and weather patterns. He calculates everything. He doesn't just strike. He waits, observes, and ensures success. The ledger you have is only part of it. His memory, his planning, his understanding of human fear, that is his power." The warning. Margaret handed Julian a small, leather-bound notebook, older than the diary he had found in the lighthouse. "This belonged to my husband," she said. "He documented Bartholomew's first known appearances, his methods, his victims. He called him the Observer. And he warned me, should anyone interfere, the fog will become more than concealment. It will become a weapon." Julian opened the notebook carefully. Inside were meticulous records of children, symbols, weather patterns, fog density measurements, and maps of coastal towns. One entry stood out. "Bartholomew observes, waits, and tests. He is patient, patient beyond understanding. He marks each child, records each movement. He creates labyrinths beneath docks and warehouses to test courage and obedience. Interference will be met with escalation." Julian's stomach churned. The predator was not only intelligent and meticulous, he was escalating. Emily's rescue had been a disruption, and Bartholomew would respond accordingly. Tracing the predator, Margaret studied the ledger and diary alongside Julian. "Look here," she said, pointing to a pattern in the coastal towns. Every second or third disappearance follows the first by nearly a decade. He observes from afar before acting. Grey Harbor, you've interrupted him. He will adapt. He will escalate. And now he knows you are watching. Julian frowned. So, he's testing me again. Margaret nodded. Yes. And the fog, it's more than just concealment. It's a psychological weapon. It isolates, disorients, and manipulates perception. He uses it to make children compliant, witnesses confused, and hunters like you cautious. You must anticipate the fog, not just react to it. Julian traced his finger along the maps. Then we predict his movements, anticipate his next target, stop him before he acts. Margaret's eyes glinted with a hard light. Yes, but you must be careful. The observer does not forgive mistakes. One misstep, one lapse, and another child will vanish. The fog thickens. That evening, Julian returned to the harbor. The fog had descended once more, denser than ever, almost tangible. Street lamps barely penetrated it. The docks seemed to disappear into the mist. Julian felt the weight of every decision, every calculation, pressing on him. Shadow growled low as they approached the northern pier. The predator had been here before. Bartholomew's presence lingered in the shadows, in the smell of salt and decay, in the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the docks. Julian examined the area carefully, using the ledger and diary to guide his movements. Every plank, every crate, every shadow was a potential hazard. Every corner could conceal the predator or a trap. And then he noticed something unusual. A set of chalk symbols, faint but unmistakable, drawn on the base of a warehouse wall. He recognized them instantly from the diary, a test, a warning, and an invitation. The predator was here. He was watching, and he was daring Julian to follow. The test begins. Julian moved carefully, shadow at his side. The chalk symbols led to a partially hidden hatch beneath the warehouse. He paused, studying the markings. Each line indicated a path, a hazard, or a trap. The predator's method was consistent: disorient, observe, and test. Julian descended into the tunnel, feeling the cold stone walls pressing in. The air was thick with moisture, the faint scent of decay and salt ever present. Shadow padded ahead, guiding Julian along the safest path. And then he heard the whisper, "Clever, but how far will you go?" The voice was calm, measured, and chilling. It carried through the tunnel, bouncing off the stone walls. Julian's grip tightened on his flashlight. This was a psychological battle as much as a physical one. Bartholomew was testing him, gauging his reactions, shaping the environment to his will. A narrow escape. Following the path indicated by the chalk symbols and the patterns in the diary, Julian navigated traps and obstacles, hidden pits, swinging nets, and false pathways. Every turn was calculated, every shadow potentially lethal. Finally, he reached a chamber where Emily's locket lay on the ground. She was not there, but the presence of the object confirmed the predator had been watching, manipulating, and orchestrating events. Julian knew he had to act quickly. The next move had to be precise, decisive, and preemptive. Bartholomew would not wait forever. He would strike again, and the fog would conceal his actions perfectly. The widow's final words. Margaret's warning echoed in Julian's mind. The observer does not forgive mistakes. One misstep, one lapse, and another child will vanish. Julian clenched his fists. He had knowledge, preparation, and strategy. He had Shadow, Emily's survival, and a network of information stretching decades. But he also knew that Bartholomew Halloway, the predator, was always calculating, always patient, and always steps ahead. The fog rolled in thicker, swallowing the harbor. Julian looked out across the water, heart hammering. Somewhere in its depths, the predator was waiting, planning, and observing. Julian knew the game was far from over. Grey Harbor was still a playground for Bartholomew Halloway, and the next move would be the most dangerous yet. The whisper of the fog carried one final message, clear and chilling. "You have been warned, Detective Cross, but warnings are not enough." Julian tightened his coat, Shadow at his side, and stepped forward into the mist. The hunt had escalated. The predator had returned, and Grey Harbor would never be the same. Grey Harbor had become unrecognizable. The fog rolled in waves, thick and suffocating, blanketing streets, docks, and alleys in a ghostly white. The faint glow of street lamps barely pierced the haze, turning familiar structures into looming shadows. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind seemed alive, like the town itself was holding its breath. Julian Cross knew that somewhere in this fog, Bartholomew Halloway was waiting, watching, calculating, and ready to strike again. Shadow padded closely at Julian's side, ears alert, nose twitching at every scent carried on the damp air. Julian had spent the past day mapping every potential hiding place along the waterfront, every warehouse, and abandoned dock that could conceal Bartholomew's traps. He had studied the diary, the ledger, and Margaret Linton's notes, memoizing patterns, symbols, and previous victim behaviors. But even with all that knowledge, Julian felt a growing unease. Bartholomew had escalated. The predator had returned, and this time, the stakes were higher. Signs of escalation. The first clue came from the docks themselves. Julian noticed subtle changes, new chains securing rusted gates, crates moved into odd positions, small symbols etched into wood that had not been there before. These were markings from Bartholomew, guiding or warning, like breadcrumbs for those observant enough to follow. Julian crouched, inspecting one symbol. It matched a pattern in the diary, an indicator of a trap. Shadow growled low, tail stiff, as if sensing danger. Julian felt the familiar chill of anticipation and fear. He whispered, "Careful, boy. He's here. I can feel it." Every step they took, the fog seemed to thicken, the air heavy with moisture and tension. Julian realized the predator was using the environment itself as a weapon. The fog disoriented, masked movement, and amplified fear. It was no longer merely concealment. It was a tool of psychological terror. The first trap. As Julian moved closer to the northern pier, a subtle shift beneath his feet caught his attention. A section of planks had been weakened, set to collapse under weight. Shadow backed sharply, alerting Julian. He leapt back just as the wood gave way, revealing a hidden pit below. The pit was lined with sharp wooden spikes, a primitive but deadly trap. Julian realized this was Bartholomew's way of testing him. Each trap, each misdirection, was designed to instill caution and fear, conditioning him to react, hesitate, and make mistakes. He studied the layout carefully. Using his prior observations and the diary, he mapped the safe path in his mind. Shadow nudged him forward, sensing the safest route. And then he heard it, the faint whisper of Bartholomew's voice carried through the fog. "Step carefully, detective. Every misstep counts." Julian's pulse quickened. The predator was here, somewhere in the fog, observing every move. And the test had only just begun. The tunnels revisited. Following the pier, Julian discovered another entrance to the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the docks. The hatch was partially concealed by debris and crates, but the chalk symbols were unmistakable, a series of lines and dots forming a map of the hazards inside. He descended cautiously, Shadow leading the way. The tunnels were damp, cold, and echoing with the distant sounds of the harbor above. Every step was deliberate, every turn calculated. Julian knew that Bartholomew had designed these tunnels to confuse and trap, to create panic and disorientation. The predator had been here before, leaving marks, signs, and traps. And now, he was returning to observe how Julian navigated them. The psychological game. The deeper Julian moved into the tunnels, the more oppressive the air became. The walls seemed to close in, the floor uneven, the darkness absolute except for his flashlight. Shadow growled low, ears forward, sensing the presence of something unseen. Then he heard it, a faint, deliberate tapping, echoing through the stone corridors. Julian froze, listening. The sound repeated, a pattern. It was Bartholomew, testing him, signaling him, perhaps even taunting him. "You are persistent." The voice echoed through the tunnels, calm and measured. "Few have ventured this far. Fewer still understand the rules. Do you?" Julian swallowed hard. "I understand enough to stop you," he called into the foggy darkness. The predator's laughter was low, chilling, and echoing. "Understand? You will learn. The fog will teach you." The second encounter. Rounding a corner, Julian glimpsed the predator ahead, partially hidden behind crates. He moved deliberately, observing, waiting for Julian to misstep. In his hand, he held another object, a small doll, eerily familiar, representing a child he had observed but not yet taken. Julian's heart pounded. Bartholomew was escalating, using fear and symbolic threats to manipulate. He wasn't just observing now, he was sending messages, signaling control, asserting dominance. Julian advanced carefully, relying on the diary's clues and his own instincts. Shadow stayed close, signaling hazards and guiding him through false pathways. The deadly embrace. Suddenly, a section of the tunnel floor collapsed under a hidden mechanism, sending a metal grate swinging toward Julian's head. He ducked, rolling to the side. The predator's voice echoed, "The fog hides all, yet reveals more than you see." Julian realized the full danger of the tunnels. The labyrinth beneath the docks was a weapon in itself, and the predator's control over it was absolute. Every hazard was calculated, every misstep deliberate. One false move could be fatal. Shadow growled fiercely, guiding Julian around another trap. Julian's heart raced, but he pressed forward, knowing Emily and other children could be at risk if he failed. A narrow escape. Following the chalk symbols and prior observations, Julian navigated through the tunnels with precision. Every turn, every step, every pause was deliberate. He avoided pitfalls, swinging nets, and false paths. Shadow remained vigilant, alerting him to dangers invisible in the dim light. At last, Julian reached a hidden chamber where the predator had left a single object, Emily's silver locket, gleaming in the flashlight beam. She was not there, but the presence of the locket confirmed the predator's observation and manipulation. Julian felt a surge of determination. Bartholomew had escalated, but this was exactly the kind of move Julian had anticipated. He was learning, adapting, and preparing to confront the predator directly. Clues from the past. Julian took the locket and examined it carefully. Inside, he found a small, folded piece of paper with a cryptic message. "The next move is crucial. The fog is alive. Follow it wisely." The handwriting was unmistakably Bartholomew's, meticulous, deliberate, and chilling. Julian realized that the predator was not only taunting him but guiding him toward the next stage of the game. He retraced his steps carefully, leading Shadow back to the surface. The fog outside was thicker than ever, swirling and shifting with unnatural precision. Every shadow, every sound, every movement could conceal the predator, preparing for the confrontation. Back at the station, Julian spread out the diary, ledger, and notes from Margaret Linton. He mapped potential locations, traps, and escape routes. The predator was planning his next move, and Julian had to anticipate it. Emily's safety, the town's children, and perhaps countless others depended on it. Julian realized that the fog's deadly embrace was more than a physical hazard. It was a psychological weapon, a manipulation of perception, fear, and isolation. To survive, he had to think like the predator, anticipate his moves, and stay 2 steps ahead. The fog whispers. As night fell, the harbor disappeared entirely into the dense fog. Julian stood on the pier, Shadow at his side, scanning the swirling whiteness. Somewhere within it, Bartholomew Halloway was watching, calculating, and waiting. The predator's message was clear. The game had escalated. Grey Harbor was no longer a town. It was a labyrinth, a battlefield, and the stage for Bartholomew's twisted designs. And Julian Cross, standing on the edge of the pier with Shadow growling low, knew one terrifying truth. He was running out of time. The whisper of the fog carried a single, chilling promise. Embrace the fog, or it will embrace you. Julian tightened his coat, gripping the flashlight and diary, Shadow at his side. The next move would be deadly, and the predator's embrace was closing in. Grey Harbor would never be the same, and Julian knew that the final confrontation was drawing near. The fog had descended upon Grey Harbor like a living entity, dense and suffocating, wrapping the town in a shroud of white. Every street, alley, and dock was transformed into a ghostly maze where shadows stretched and twisted, hiding threats that lurked just beyond sight. Julian Cross stood at the edge of the northern pier, Shadow at his side, gripping the leather-bound diary and ledger like lifelines. Tonight, it would end. He had followed the trail, anticipated the predator's moves, navigated the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the docks, and survived the deadly tests Bartholomew Halloway had orchestrated for him. Now, Julian knew the final confrontation was inevitable. The predator had returned, he had escalated, and he was ready to strike again. But this time, Julian would meet him head-on. Tracking the predator. Using the patterns from the diary and ledger, Julian pinpointed the most likely location of Bartholomew's final trap. the abandoned lighthouse on the cliffs, the same place where Margaret Linton's husband had once observed him decades earlier. The structure loomed through the fog, its white paint peeling, its iron railings rusted, and the sound of the crashing waves below echoing like a warning. Julian approached carefully, Shadow growling low. Every footstep on the weathered planks was deliberate, measured. He scanned the fog for movement, listening for any sound beyond the natural creaks and groans of the lighthouse. Then he saw it, a shadow flitting across the observation deck, tall, thin, and deliberate. Bartholomew had been waiting, watching, calculating. The lair. Inside the lighthouse, Julian found the entrance to another hidden chamber beneath the stairs. The air was thick with mildew and the faint metallic scent that always accompanied the predator's presence. The walls were lined with notes, symbols, and maps, decades of meticulous observation and planning. Each piece reinforced the reality Julian had feared. Bartholomew Halloway had devoted his life to studying, manipulating, and preying on children. Julian descended cautiously, Shadow at his side, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The predator had designed this place to disorient and control. Hidden traps, false pathways, and symbolic warnings were scattered throughout the chamber. Every step required focus, calculation, and courage. Then Julian heard it, a soft, deliberate voice echoing through the chamber. "Detective Cross, you've come far. But you are still learning. Do you understand the game you've entered?" Julian's heart raced. "I understand enough to end it tonight, Halloway." The voice laughed, low and chilling. "End it? You think it will be so simple? I've studied every step you've taken, every move, every hesitation. You are predictable, but I admire your persistence." Face to face, rounding a corner, Julian finally saw him. Bartholomew Halloway stood in the center of the chamber, tall, pale, and deliberate in his movements. His black coat brushed the floor, his hat shadowing a face that had observed and tormented generations. In his hand, he held a small, intricately carved figurine, a symbolic representation of the last child he had observed, a reminder of his control. Julian took a deep breath, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. Shadow growled fiercely, ears forward, eyes locked on the predator. "You've studied the past," Julian said, voice steady. "You've observed, manipulated, and terrorized. But the game ends tonight." Bartholomew smiled faintly, tilting his head. "The past, the present, the future, they are all my domain. You are merely a participant. Do you think knowledge alone can defeat me?" Julian stepped forward. "No, but courage, strategy, and justice can." The battle of wits. Bartholomew lunged, moving with surprising agility for his age. Julian reacted immediately, using his knowledge of the tunnels, traps, and symbols to anticipate the predator's moves. The chamber became a battlefield of shadows and fog, the predator's traps springing around them, nets, hidden pits, and swinging bars. Julian dodged and countered, using the environment to his advantage. Shadow leapt at a swinging bar, knocking it aside, alerting Julian to the next hazard. Every move was deliberate, every step calculated. This was not just physical combat, it was a battle of wits, a test of intellect, courage, and preparation. Bartholomew laughed, a low, chilling sound that echoed through the chamber. "You think you can outthink me? I've spent decades observing patterns, predicting behavior, and shaping the environment. You are clever, but temporary." Julian ignored him, focusing on the path ahead, using the diary and ledger to anticipate traps and guide Emily's locket, which lay on a crate, safely past the hazards. The revelation. Amid the chaos, Julian noticed something unexpected. A series of older notes pinned to the wall, decades-old observations about the first children Bartholomew had taken. One note stood out, a detailed account of a personal motive hidden beneath the predator's meticulous facade. Bartholomew had not only been a predator, he had been enacting revenge against the coastal towns, punishing families he deemed negligent, careless, or unworthy. The pattern of abductions, traps, and observation was rooted in this warped desire for control and justice. Julian realized the depth of Bartholomew's obsession. He did not act out of impulse. He acted with purpose, with historical awareness, and with the intent to shape the town itself. Turning the tables, Julian used this knowledge to his advantage. He manipulated the environment, leading Bartholomew into a section of the chamber where hidden mechanisms could be triggered against him. Carefully, Julian guided Shadow to press a lever, activating a cage that dropped over the predator. Bartholomew struggled, his calm demeanor replaced by irritation. "Clever, but not enough," he hissed. Julian advanced, flashlight illuminating the predator's face. "It's over, Holloway. You've terrorized Grey Harbor for decades. Not anymore." The final struggle. Bartholomew lunged one final time, desperate and violent. Julian sidestepped, using leverage from the cage mechanism to subdue him. Shadow backed and lunged, holding Bartholomew in place. The predator's struggle was frantic but ultimately futile. "You cannot contain me forever," Bartholomew spat, voice venomous. Julian's expression was grim. "Tonight, you end your reign. Tonight, Grey Harbor breathes again." The predator was secured, trapped by his own environment and Julian's strategy. For the first time in decades, Bartholomew Holloway was powerless. Aftermath. The authorities arrived at dawn, taking Bartholomew into custody. The tunnels beneath the docks were mapped, secured, and investigated. Families of previous victims were finally given closure, and Emily was safely reunited with her parents. Julian stood on the pier, Shadow at his side, watching the fog dissipate. Grey Harbor, still battered and wary, was beginning to breathe again. Margaret Linton approached, eyes soft but resolute. "You did it, Julian. You stopped him." Julian shook his head slightly. "We stopped him tonight. But the lessons remain. The fog, the shadows, the patterns, they teach us how fragile safety can be." Margaret nodded. "And how necessary vigilance is. You've saved lives, but Grey Harbor will remember the fog, and the predator who lurked within it." Closing the ledger. Back at the station, Julian placed the diary and ledger in a secure vault. Every detail, every observation, every record of Bartholomew Holloway's decades-long reign would remain preserved, not for his use, but as a warning. The predator had returned, and for a brief moment, the town had feared the worst. But Julian's courage, strategy, and determination had turned the tables. Grey Harbor had survived the fog, the labyrinths, and the shadows. Julian stepped outside into the morning light, Shadow padding beside him. The harbor was calm, the mist lifting, revealing familiar streets and docks. For the first time in months, Julian allowed himself a deep breath. Bartholomew Holloway had been stopped. The children were safe. The town would heal. And yet, in the quiet corners of Grey Harbor, the fog whispered, carrying memories of terror, observation, and fear, a reminder that vigilance and courage were always required, for shadows can always return. Julian looked out across the water, Shadow at his feet, and whispered to himself, "Grey Harbor remembers. And so will I." The fog lifted, the sun broke through, and the town began to breathe again.